Cue up the Willie Nelson, because we are on the road again. Grand Park, Colts Camp, where you will find us. My name is Jake Query. Jimmy Cook here as well. Jack Johnston is our on-site engineer, the pride of Garin Catholic and Ball State University. Eddie Garrison is back in studio for us. As Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Colts, is set to join us an hour and a half from right now, halfway through this session for us today, but practice getting underway at 2 o'clock for the Colts. They will practice from 2 until 3:30. A number of different activities taking place here at Colts Camp, as they then will have the day off tomorrow. They resume to the practice field on Wednesday. Plenty to talk about over the course of the show today. Jimmy, we are sitting right here just a little bit to the left. If you see in front of us, and I realize it's radio, so we've got to go theater of the mind for those that are listening at home or at work or in their car, but we are sitting in the far northwest corner of the practice field of the Indianapolis Colts. If Michael Pittman Jr. was to make a diving catch into the end zone in the corner and then his inertia was to carry him off, we're right by where, like one of those people on television is holding up one of those huge audio things that gets pummeled over by an NFL player. That's where we are essentially. But just to the right of us, there's a red hash mark painted here. Just to the right of that is the landmark site just about 1 year ago today of the infamous coyote dung that Kevin Bowen picked up thinking it was grass clippings. Just so you know.
It's in the history books. It's there.
We are within the realm of greatness. Good Monday to you. My name is Jake Query. It is Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. We are going to be on the road not once but twice this week, which we're excited about. Starting out the week here at Colts Camp, and then on Thursday we will be at the Dairy Bar at the Great Indiana State Fair because, yes, indeed, I said to somebody yesterday, Jimmy, you know, I'm looking today and I'm seeing kids like are back in school. Everybody's posting the pictures of their kids' first day of school. Some of those went back. I think Warren Township went back last week.
Insane.
I am fully convinced now that I have before me, we need a sound effect of a look into the future, like a 1.21 gigawatts look into the future, because I'm looking into the future of the year 2035,
oh, man.
right? 11 years from right now, 2035 into the future. And in my glimpse into the future in 2035, I can see before me the post on social media that is posting the calendar of events for the city of Indianapolis celebrating Independence Day. And it literally says, July 4th, 10 p.m., fireworks downtown off the Salesforce Tower or wherever they're going to be doing it in 2035. Maybe they take it back there. I don't know. Fireworks at 10 p.m. to celebrate Independence Day. 11 p.m. Hello, autumn. The welcome to fall. Because that's the way we're moving it now. It just keeps going back and back and back. And here we are now. Hard to believe. But the Colts are getting ready essentially down the home stretch here of their training camp. The Olympics are done a week from yesterday, and you know that the Olympics are starting to wind down when you're getting into track and field events because that's always kind of the swan song of it. The men's basketball team getting a big win over Puerto Rico. Tyrese Halliburton, I believe, the only player that did not score, although, to be fair, he was doing other things. And I'm not saying that he was out there as some dynamic game changer for Team USA, but you know, he wasn't looking necessarily to score. Anthony Edwards was sensational and was going for like a single-game record. He didn't get it, but Halliburton was facilitating for a lot of guys late. I don't think you look too much into that. I think we now have the understanding that Halliburton is not going to be a guy that is starting and leading them in points in any remaining games here for Team USA, but nonetheless, still very cool for him to be playing.
Yeah, I mean, and the minutes are there, right? We talked about it a couple of games ago when he gets a DNP effectively coach's decision, no minutes for him. The last two games now against South Serbia and against Puerto Rico, 7 minutes and 10 minutes, give or take, respectively. And that's probably about the sweet spot for him. He's not, Jake. You've pointed it out. I've pointed it out. Eddie's mentioned it. He is not a face of Team USA. He is not a go-to guy, a part of this roster, but he is a part of the roster, and he's there. And he was good enough to be one of the best players in the world to be a part of Team USA. And I still think there's going to be a stretch or a moment for him at some point. And whether that arrives or not, they are on track to win gold. I said this at the beginning of their showcase back in Las Vegas. They're likely going to win gold. I know there's a level of arrogance about that with American basketball, but the way this team was constructed, and especially the defensive dynamics, which is still an area he needs to improve on, in all likelihood, they were once again going to coast their way to gold. There's still games to be played. but they are on that home stretch now, and at the very least, we know there is a minutes allotment for Tyrese Halliburton. He doesn't need to be the hero here, but it's nice for him to be a part of it.
How much of the Olympics did you watch over the course of the weekend? Your weekend sports viewing was consumed how? And were you, like me, glued to the set, even though it was blacked out and you can't watch it locally, seeing if the Chicago White Sox are indeed going to ever snap their losing streak?
I only got the Chicago White Sox notification via a push notification.
Still,
how
long? Let me ask you this.
20 games.
How long is it? How long is it before? And I get and I'm always appreciative of it. Okay. We're sitting here setting up, and my buddy Kyle, who works as a videographer, and he's a freelancer. He works for all the different networks. He's setting up today for NFL Network, just on the other side of where we are right now. So I was talking to him, and he said, well, I won't be able to text you during the show today because I'm actually working today. And I always appreciate when people text me during the course of the show, and sometimes just to say hi, which I'm basically begging for right now. My phone number is 317-523-9288. I enjoy hearing from people, also their critique or criticism of the program, and we try to facilitate and let people know, I try to accommodate what people, the questions they have or whatever else. 317-523-9288. Now, this program does not reach, at least terrestrial on radio-wise, into the Chicago area, but how long will it be before I get a text from somebody within the upper brass of the Chicago White Sox that says, we're begging you. We're begging you to come back. You come once a year for a game. We are appreciative. You took a day off in what seems like years ago in early July, and the two of you came up, that being me and Shannon, not me and Jimmy. The two of you came up. You had a hot dog. You got your photo. And you stayed for our win over the Minnesota Twins that was capped off with an immaculate inning.
Man, what a time.
At the time when the immaculate inning happened, I said to myself, I can't believe we left in the top of the ninth because there was a no-hitter going through 5. I told Shannon we had to stay at least to make sure that we didn't miss out on a no-hitter because of the rarity of a no-hitter. I had no idea when I left that stadium and I missed out on an immaculate inning to end the game. The first time in 102 years that an immaculate inning, which is 9 straight pitches of strikes in an inning for striking out the side, that had not happened in over a century. I had no idea when we left that actually what I was seeing as the rarity was not the immaculate inning, was not the potential of a no-hitter, but the Chicago White Sox have not won a game since.
They have not.
How long will it be before the Chicago White Sox beg me to come back? Clearly, and this is true. Why do you think we're at Colts camp? These teams are figuring out where good karma exists.
Yeah, yep.
I exude it. Greatness just permeates off of me. Mm-hmm. Right now, There are 10,000 gnats and flies circling around me in the heat and humidity of Grand Park. Why, you ask? Because they know of greatness, right?
Yep.
And the Chicago White Sox probably want to latch onto that, don't you think?
I mean, that's why I continue to come into work every day. It's because I get to be so close to the greatness itself. Look, your earliest call would be Friday, August 9th. They're currently in Oakland taking on the Athletics, which kind of feels like an if not now when moment for the White Sox in terms of this streak going. With my luck, they'll wind up beating the Yankees on Monday, August 12th. That also in Chicago. So you're going to have a nice span starting next week, Jake. End of this week, early next week. Opportunities, if that call happens, for them to call Jake Query and say, Jake, we're not going to say this is quite Curse the Billy Goat level, but it kind of feels like it, and we need to stop this before it gets any further.
At this point, though, here's the thing. And look, I know, folks, there's plenty to talk about, including the Colts yesterday on the practice field and the things that took place over the course of the weekend and setting up our conversation with Shane Steichen, which is going to be at 1:30 today. The Olympics obviously still going on. At this point, Jimmy, and I'm not some huge White Sox fan. Matter of fact, the Reds are typically my major league team. But they're kind of, ironically enough, they're kind of making me a fan because you got to go for history at this point. They now have the longest losing streak, if I'm not mistaken, of the 20th century, right?
Yes.
They're like entering into the stratosphere of like 5th or 6th longest losing streak of all time. You got to go for it. If they go out now and they win one of these games and screw this up, I'm going to be livid. And then you have, if I'm not mistaken, they're getting ready to take on the Oakland Athletics, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now,
is there tonight?
Okay.
This is if not now when territory, Jake. It feels like it.
I'd like to know this. And this is what I love about the Chicago White Sox. This for sports. And I get it. It's not a baseball town. We're at Colts camp. We should be talking Colts. But I'm talking about just sports in general. You can see things that happen in sports. When greatness is in front of you, you have to embrace it, okay? And here's the thing, and this is why you have to love the 2024 Chicago White Sox.
Okay.
The White Sox are getting ready to go into – they're in Oakland, correct?
They are.
They're taking on the Athletics at Oakland Coliseum. And I've been to Oakland Coliseum. The top section of Oakland Coliseum has the tarps over it, right?
Yes.
That originally just had the A's logo, and now the tarps say, "Welcome to Oakland Coliseum, home of the Oakland Athletics," and then there's the A's logo, and then next to it the elephant. Because there's no seats available in the upper arena, because they haven't sold them since Jose Canseco was playing there, right? So this is a team in the Oakland Athletics that is terrible, that is at an arm wrestling match with not only the city of Oakland to get a new stadium, because at one time they had raw sewage floating through the clubhouse, but then they now had an agreement to go to Las Vegas, but Las Vegas is in an arm wrestling match with their taxpayers, so they're going to go to Sacramento. So they now are not only abandoning Oakland for one place, they're abandoning Oakland for one place who told them no, and they still said they want to see other people. Right?
Yes.
So they got on Tinder, and they found Sacramento, and they matched, and yet they're still living because it's a weird situation where they broke up with their ex, but, like, they both have a dog and combined rent. So they're having to live the Oakland Athletics in the Coliseum right now, just temporarily until all of a sudden the new girlfriend gets her place ready. And with that, the White Sox go into it and still consider it a hostile environment because the 4,200 people they're going to play in front of in this series against the Oakland Athletics is double what they're seeing when they're in Chicago, because they may be leaving for Nashville and they might lose 125 games this year, and they haven't won since Shannon and I went on July the 10th. It's beautiful.
This from the show that precedes this, of course, Greeny, but Paul Hembo from Greeny tweets out earlier today, Jake, this is how bad the White Sox have been, just for context. If you were to take away the 14-game losing streak they had this year and the 20-game losing streak they're currently on,
let's go.
Their record would be 27-53. That win percentage of .338 would still be the lowest in majors.
That is so beautiful. I mean, you got to try, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you got to tip your cap and say, I love the respect for greatness. I love it.
And the part that really stinks, not to get too much in the weeds, but just 4 years ago, these old tweets exposed type of things have been circulating with Jeff Paston and others that mentioned how in 2020 it looked like this was a great young core with Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez and company that were going to be a new cornerstone moment for the White Sox. And most, if not all, of those players are now gone via trades, and they're in a dumpster fire of epic proportions.
Hey, Jake, my name is Eric. This on text message. It's clear that Halliburton is not playing much for Team USA because of his defense. I'm hopeful the work ethic and commitment to greatness his Olympic teammates have will rub off on him and the rest of his laurels for making the roster. Agreed. I do agree with that. As I was saying, I think that you have to look at, with the Team USA situation and Tyrese Halliburton, when Tyrese Halliburton was acquired by the Indiana Pacers, the narrative was this is a huge home run for the Pacers because his style of play, his play above the rim, his setting up teammates, his unselfishness, and his infectious personality in terms of, like, he smiles through a room. There are certain people that that you can tell, and we're on radio, for example, so, I'm always fascinated and flattered when if people recognize me, like, yeah, I hear you, I'm part of the company. And I'm like, how do you know what I look like? Because we're on radio, right? I know we have a live stream.
Sure.
But with that said, there are certain people that have a smile in their voice. And you can tell when you hear them talk that they are talking with a smile and they are talking through this enthusiasm. That is Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton has a personality that is large. And when he came to the Pacers, the thought process was that personality, that smile in his voice, combined with his ability with eyes in the back of his head to throw up lobs or set up teammates in all areas, are going to make other players want to play for the Indiana Pacers. And the Pacers have done everything they could over the last 12.5 years to attract free agent players, to overcome the limitation of not being near a beach, not being 70 degrees year-round in the basketball season. You know, they built a fabulous practice facility. They built with a very cool tunnel that goes from the facility underneath the street into the arena. They have many advantageous things. The area around Gainbridge Fieldhouse, they've tried to feature in terms of the residences and the apartments and everything going on. They've done everything that they could, have the Pacers. But the reality is you still are having a hard time competing against the no taxes of Florida, the beaches of California, etc. So Halliburton was the guy that was going to be somebody that was going to push them over the top of that. And I think that we thought it and we assumed it for some of the reasons that now deviate from the actual reasons that could manifest. And that's exactly what is being mentioned there by Eric. Being for Team USA, the thought was, Jimmy, that it was going to be beneficial to Indiana because players were going to see Halliburton and say, I got to play on the floor with this guy. But the benefit now might actually be that Halliburton is going and his personality is such that he is, getting closer with guys. I saw he and Anthony Edwards talking a lot on the sidelines. That stuff happens naturally. But what I think is going to be advantage Indiana is this. LeBron James is, 39 years old?
That is correct.
He's done everything that one would want to do in the game of basketball. Yes, I know. He didn't win as many titles as Jordan. He's the all-time leading scorer in the NBA. He's met every challenge. He's done it, in my opinion. He's built schools. He's put kids through college.
In the modern social age, he's an athlete without, outside of the decision,
Correct.
No real controversy to find him, which is incredibly understated.
He's had a couple of, political narrative
Sure, but you get what I mean. In terms of towing a line I am
a huge admirer and mad respect for LeBron James. But LeBron James, from a resume standpoint, doesn't really have much left to prove. Kevin Durant, from a resume standpoint, doesn't really have much left to prove. Anthony Edwards, from a resume standpoint, came into this saying, look, I'm going into this with the mentality that I'm the guy. And against Puerto Rico, he was, right?
Yep.
But the two guys that are driving that engine that just naturally walk in and have and exude from them an aura of command and greatness are LeBron James, and then once he joined them later, Kevin Durant. Those two guys very clearly. In a room of all alphas, Steph Curry's been the best player on every team he's ever played on. At Davidson, he's the guy. Davidson is in the Sweet 16, and everybody's getting captivated by their run through the NCAA tournament because of watching Steph Curry. Anthony Edwards, number one player taken in the draft, goes to Georgia, plays for Tom Crean. They have a terrible season, but he is the guy. Everybody in the SEC is like, this guy's only here 1 year, but holy cow, look at this guy. He has literally taken this league by the throat. Every single player on that roster, for the most part, Bam Adebayo might be an exception because at Kentucky, you're obviously there. But everybody there has the mentality and has, probably since they were 15 years old, that they are the guy.
Yep.
The only player on that roster of Team USA that may not have had that is Tyrese Halliburton. Because Tyrese Halliburton, growing up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and then going to Iowa State, those are not places where people are knocking down your door and everybody is packing in to anoint the basketball star as the guy. And he went relatively off the radar in high school. In college, even, he went relatively off the radar. And then he goes into a situation in the NBA in Sacramento originally where they've got other players there, other very good players. Now, he was a key part of it, but in order to fully blossom, he had to get out of that, and he comes to Indiana. So he's the one guy that probably needs the most tutelage in terms of the understanding of being the guy. And Victor Oladipo didn't handle it well. Paul George didn't handle it well. Both very good players. And Paul George is a whole different conversation. I don't blame Paul George for what happened, but I understand also that Paul George was in that same situation. But they didn't, I don't think, have the tutelage of veteran players that said, when it's time to turn up the wick, racing term, but when it's time to turn up the knob and hit the extra boost here, you got to let it go. And those two guys, in the case of LeBron James and Kevin Durant, for example, on this team, have led by that example, Jimmy. And to me, that is advantage Indiana because Tyrese Halliburton, one would hope, to Eric's point, is going to come back and say, as great a team as that is, Now I know what it's like. It's one thing for everybody to know you're the guy. It's another to show why you're the guy. And that's the thing that I hope through osmosis that he has experienced through this. And in addition to that, he has been able to look at it and say, if LeBron James is going to defend like that, if Drew Holiday and Derek White, who just won NBA rings, are going to defend like that, then that's what I need to do. So that's my hope, is that it all comes into fruition for him and it's advantage Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, if I was Tyrese Halliburton or if I was a part of Team USA as a new piece to that squad, my goal would be to be a sponge, to absorb as much knowledge as you can from your fellow stars around the NBA, even if you want to debate the hierarchy of where Tyrese Halliburton ranks. But yeah, if LeBron James at 39 years old is going to lock into a defensive stance when he's playing for his country and not playing for an NBA title, imagine the level of intensity that is still in his routine. Or like you highlighted, the idea of any of these guys, Kevin Durant, who's just coming off an injury, Devin Booker, Joel Embiid, guys that, had early exits in the playoffs, and then the Tatum of it all, and the Derek White of it all, and the Drew Holiday of it all, who have nothing left to prove this year. They just won an NBA title, ended a 16-year drought for the Boston Celtics. But if they're all willing to bring it to another level because they understand what is expected of them and what is needed to go win gold, you would hope that Tyrese is able to absorb that. And I do think that there is still room for improvement for Tyrese Halliburton. I don't think you're going to know where the ceiling is on his defensive prowess until we get to the playoffs, where it really matters. I'm not trying to undercut the regular season. We love the regular season. I'm always going to game. Jake, you're going to games. Eddie produces for the Pacers Radio Network, for crying out loud. Like, we love the regular season. But you see things turned up a notch when the stakes matter. The stakes matter right now for Team USA going for gold. They will matter as the Pacers try to continue to build a championship-level nucleus that is maybe able to bring the franchise its first NBA title in history. But the other point you bring up, I don't think it's going to be something that we see right away, but playing the long game of Tyrese Halliburton courting stars is what I'm interested in seeing. Because inherently, you mentioned it, talking to Anthony Edwards. No, I'm not saying Anthony Edwards getting poached, but talking to Anthony Edwards or Bam Adebayo or other guys on this team, and just, it's like a second All-Star game, getting to hang out with all these fellow NBA players, talk strategy, talk play style. You're hoping that you're setting seeds for at some point in this Tyrese Halliburton contract window or second contract window that you are attracting those stars, starting with where Team USA is.
Jimmy, there was a documentary when I was a senior in high school with Arthur Agee was one guy, and it's terrible to say that I can't remember the name of the other guy. I should be able to. William something. Hoop Dreams was the name of the documentary. And it followed two guys that played basketball in Chicago from the age of like 7th grade through their senior year of high school. Fascinating documentary. And I'll never forget, and it's terrible because I fall victim to it right now, the second player at the end of it has a great quote where he says, all anybody ever says to me is, don't forget about me when I get to the NBA, but I want to say to them, don't forget about me if I don't.
Yeah.
And here I am, and I can't remember his name. But, I mean,
There's some irony there.
It was a 33-year-old documentary. Yes, I don't know why I remember Arthur Agee's name. But anyway, in the documentary, it shows them at one of the AAU tournaments in like Jonesboro, Arkansas, I think, which is where Arthur Agee ended up playing college basketball. But in it, you see, and I know this only because it was my class. I was the class of 91. And you see Juwan Howard, Chris Webber, and like Jimmy King, and they're all sitting there eating pizza in some dorm room at this AAU tournament from like all these different places. And that was, I've always said, that was the introduction to people of the way things were going in terms of the direction of basketball. And that is that guys start talking about and dreaming about and laying out the groundwork for dream teams and super teams at a younger and younger age.
William Gates, by the way.
William Gates, thank you.
Yep.
Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James likely put together that Miami team, not in that summer of the decision, but years before.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
When they were like, hey, we're all going to get together sometime. Let's plan it all out. And so
that's why modern fans talk about Team USA being this networking opportunity, is because of the foundation that was laid there.
This is essentially the the variation in 2024, the $100 million variation of exactly that. I mean, sure, they're not sitting around in the dorm room eating pizza. They're actually at a 5-star place eating crepes probably, which, by the way, we got crepes when I was in Paris. Did you get crepes?
I did get crepes. I was there, yeah.
I didn't realize this. We had been out and we stopped and got crepes and we're like, we'll eat them back. And we had a boutique type hotel, so it was a smaller room.
Sure.
I got back in the morning and listen, this doesn't come off the way, unfortunately, it sounds. There was like chocolate sauce everywhere. Like I didn't realize how messy those things were.
Do you imagine that the room service, the housekeeping had a very long list of questions when they walked in and saw the remnants of the crepes?
We did try to clean it up as much as possible. We didn't want the room looking like there was any sort of even illegal activity going on. But nonetheless, those are the things that I hope benefits Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers in terms of, to your term, the long play, right, when it comes. All right, on the program today, Shane Steichen, just about an hour from now, head coach of the Colts. Colts camp resuming here at 2 o'clock today. We're at Grand Park in Westfield. And when we come back, also scheduled to join us today, by the way, Mike Chappell going to join us just about 35 minutes from now. But when we come back, something happened yesterday in the Olympics that has not happened in over a century. Over a century. Matter of fact, a record was set that was it's like the Chicago White Sox. You're going for history, right? History made in Paris, and it was made by a guy who went to high school about a 7-iron from where we are right now. I'll let you know what I'm talking about next. Road again. Colts Camp, Grand Park in Westfield, where you will find us. Jake Query along with Jimmy Cook. Our on-site engineer is Jack Johnston, who, by the way, wasn't there a boxer, Jack Johnson? Isn't that right?
Also a musical artist, Jack Johnson, as
That's
well.
right, definitely a musical artist,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Eddie Garrison is the one spinning the hits for us back in studio. Thursday, we will also be on the road. We will be at the Dairy Bar at the Indiana State Fair, slinging up some grilled cheese and milkshakes and the whole deal with the American Dairy Association of Indiana. So they don't dust us off very often, but when they do, we love it, right? Because we get to go twice within the same week to get out on the road. I mentioned something that happened in Paris of local implication that I will tell you in just a second here. Let me begin by this in hearing that live version. I don't know if that was a live version of Willie Nelson. Several people pointed out to me, and look, I'll give it its due, right? My cousin, for example, is, for whatever reason, my cousin Doug has made it his personal mission in the last 6 months of our existence on planet Earth together, even though we've spent an entire life on planet Earth together. He's decided that he is going to try to make me a fish fan. And not only do I don't like swimming near fish. I don't mind eating fish, but I don't want to see it before it's prepared. And I don't really like looking at it when I eat it because if it's got that gray stuff in it, that grosses me out.
Okay. You're talking about the food, right? Not the band?
Well, that's what I'm getting at, Eddie, the food and the band, right? So fish in general, with an F, I have reservation about. Fish, the band, is what Doug is trying his hardest to make me a fan of. And he tried to get me to go out to Ruoff over the last 3 days to go watch them play, and, kind of flippantly, because I was like, yeah, I think I'm good. And while I appreciated the offer, I did not make it out. He was kind enough to have Joel Sebastianelli of IndyCar Radio join him for one of the nights. But I saw a video. And look, people that you do you, man. I mean, I was one of those probably until I matured about 10 years ago that would laugh at people to get on people about things that they liked that I didn't. And then I thought to myself, I wore a bandana on my head and a pair of Bo Jackson cross trainers to go see Guns N' Roses in concert in Las Vegas in 2000 and whatever. So I get it. I mean, you do you. I will say I saw video from the Fish concert of one of the guys with some instrument that looked like some sort of a water slide, and it wasn't a bong, but it was an instrument allegedly, and he basically was up there by himself making fart noises, and people this is apparently like everybody thought it was great. They're bopping around, and I literally thought to myself, I guess when
regret you didn't go.
When I was in fourth grade, I could have used the palm of my hand or my armpit to apparently be a basis for fish. I don't get it. I mean, look, people want to go and enjoy it and have fun. I'm glad they did, whatever. That's cool. And everybody's like, they put on an unbelievable show for 3 straight nights. And, okay, I'm glad people enjoyed it. I just don't get it. I hate to say that. I don't get it. Now, there are bands that I like that not everybody, that other people would not like. So it's all relative. I get it. Did you happen to watch Jimmy Cook over the weekend? The gold medal match. There were a couple of sporting events that I watched in the Olympics over the weekend. I watched the gold medal finals in table tennis. I didn't realize that you have to, show the ball first before you serve it.
Okay.
And then as soon as they show the ball, and then they look very, intently over the table, and then all hell breaks loose.
I mean, it moves so fast.
And then I vomit.
It almost feels unfair to not show the ball to begin with, right? Because you could have sleight of hand. I mean, it's all just you blink once and you miss it type of thing with how fast the opposing players end up operating around table tennis in the Olympics. It's insane. Absolutely insane.
Now,
and it's the one sport, too, Jake, where if you, polled 50 people on the street that have played ping pong before, they'd be like, oh, I could do that in the Olympics, and you'd be absolutely wrecked.
You've played ping pong. You ain't played table tennis, right? Rajiv Ram is the pride of Carmel High School. Really nice guy, too, by the way. And I don't know if you know or not, but probably it was even hotter for him in Paris because of the new hair that he's got thanks to We Grow Hair Indy. He is a client. But he is now, yesterday he was participating in the gold medal matchup for doubles tennis. He has become, he's a great tennis player, obviously, and had great epic matches here in the state of Indiana at Carmel High School, one of the great tennis programs in the Midwest, really around the country. But he has become a doubles specialist for sure, especially later in his career. But he got into the gold medal finals, and going up against Australia, 6-7, 6-8, 7-6, 7-1, 10-8 tiebreak, loses the gold medal matchup and gets a silver medal. Still very, very cool, right? I mean, to get the silver instead of gold, you would be probably two ways to look at it. You would be heartbroken to not get the gold. But, of course, when it comes to professional tennis, there are so many variations of places that you can play and different things that you can do.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be – I mean, it would be very, very cool, don't get me wrong, to get the gold. But a silver, still nothing to sneeze at.
I thought his perspective on it was very cool. I mean, you mentioned it. He's a 40-year-old Olympian. The last time he'd been in an Olympic final was in 2016 in Rio when he's in mixed doubles with Venus Williams, I believe it was. And they wind up getting a silver medal there. And he had been asked after the match or in his media availability afterwards how he felt about all of it. And he had the proper perspective, Jake, which is if you would have asked him as a young boy, learning the game and training to play tennis professionally, that he would wind up with 2 Olympic medals, he would have absolutely taken that. I mean, it's the grace of defeat that you expect from any high-level athlete. But
you mentioned the age, right?
Yeah.
40?
Yeah.
He is the oldest Olympic medalist in 116 years.
Man, that's impressive.
It's pretty cool, right? Which is kind of surprising because you would think that gives you, to get perspective, when you think about the Dream Team in 92, Larry Bird was at the end of his career when the Dream Team
Is it oldest tennis or oldest ever?
I believe it's the
because
oldest.
One article in the Star says tennis, but I don't know. I've only just heard that
I thought I read
factoid from
it's
you
the oldest
today.
Olympian.
If it's oldest Olympian ever, that's incredible. Or since in 116 years.
Let me make sure that I thought it was oldest Olympic medal. Tennis, you're right. Tennis medalist. Sorry, 116 years.
I mean, still
still
incredible.
Within tennis. I was going to say.
Because I was going to say LeBron's probably pretty mad, right? I mean,
well, he's 39, right? But I will say, though, you still have to, in terms of an Olympic medal, I mean, what other sports would facilitate for somebody at 40 years old to win one? I mean, basketball being one of them, right?
Would one of the, shooting or archery maybe?
Yeah, that's possible.
If we're really stretching the gap of Olympic sports where you could have longevity.
Well, then you've got how old was the shooter from Istanbul, the pistol shooter?
Oh, the guy.
That guy. How old's that guy, Jack? 51. Okay, there you go. That guy's just out there. He's like, yeah, whatever. So, yeah, my apologies. The oldest, but still.
No, 116-year drought was ended, or 116-year mark was broken. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible.
Tennis medalist, 116 years. That is very impressive. So, congratulations to Rajiv Ram.
Would you be able to move past that, by the way?
What's that?
Because our society, I hate it for a lot of reasons, but our society is gold or bust. Would you, finally getting back there after 8 years, would you be able to have that perspective that he had, which is, hey, I have 2 silvers?
So. Yeah, I do think so. I mean, life is relative, especially as you get older, quite truthfully, Jimmy.
Yeah.
As you get older, you learn to appreciate more just the rarity of opportunities and trying to soak every opportunity, right? I mean, just for example, when I was 30, I would not have found anything beneficial about a guy, because people have corrected me now, playing an Electrolux vacuum cleaner on a stage and making fart noises that people consider to be great music. When I was 40, I probably would have said, yeah, whatever. At 51 now, I can appreciate at least the fact that I could do that also.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, so, yes, your perspective does change. Yesterday at Colts camp, my understanding is by all report, I was at the Indians game yesterday. Had a great time with Chiefs fan Steve and his wife Brenda. It was a little warm, but we watched the Indians and Toledo Mud Hens play. I've never seen this before, but in the 9th inning, going into it, I looked up, and both teams had 8 runs, 11 hits, and 1 error. They had matching score lines after 8. 8 runs, 11 hits, 1 error. I've never seen it that close. Indians lost the game, but it was a lot of fun being out there with Steve and Brenda, and we had a good time. Steve's favorite player is Beer, the first baseman for the Indians, and he made sure to cheer every time Beer made a play. But so I did not see yesterday Colts camp, but my understanding is yesterday better day for the defense. Offense struggling just a little bit yesterday. Now, the question becomes, Jimmy, is that because the defense elevated, or is that because the offense is out of sync?
This could be one of the rare instances, Jake, where you could take a positive to rest your head on both sides of the ball. I think, to answer the question, it was the defense rising to the occasion, playing better, and showing growth. But by all accounts, from what I had seen from clips online, Kevin Bowen's firsthand accounts, of course, our very own on 1075thefan.com, it was a overall consistent bar that had been set for Anthony Richardson prior to yesterday, and he winds up going 7 for 12, but not a ton of turnover-filled aspects. A couple overthrows here or there, a couple of missed opportunities with hooking up with targets, but not a day where you would look at Anthony Richardson play and say, man, he played very bad, and that there's red flags or concerns by any means. From a defensive standpoint, it felt like another very strong day across the board, especially in the trenches. One nugget that Kevin had highlighted that I think we'll continue to talk about was that you saw some flash from A.D. Mitchell. And I said this last week, it's looking more and more like it's going to be less of a true position competition for Alec Pierce. Now, maybe we wind up being way off on this, and Pierce is just the guy, and you see just sparing use of A.D. Mitchell. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you'll see a decent divvying up of snap counts between Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell. I'm curious to get Shane Steichen's perspective on that a little bit later. If they use those two guys, because they have kind of two different skill sets in terms of what they do really well, if they use them in different situations offensively, maybe that's a new dynamic wrinkle to the Colts offense that is just at the disposal of Anthony Richardson, which you would think in turn further helps his development, having two useful wideouts that you're utilizing in different situations.
Pam points out, by the way, the oldest Olympic medalist equestrian. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The horse was almost 50. The female that won it was 56 or 58.
We're still on a
years old.
Campaign to get the horses medals, right?
That's right.
Still,
the horse should
that's
get
still
medals.
on the.
Somebody, and again, the number of brain droppings that I have that then suddenly, like a couple days later, people are stealing material. Because I mentioned that, and then a couple days later, somebody like went viral on, thank you, somebody went viral on social media by saying, like, I can't believe the horses don't get medals. And I'm like, wait a minute, where have I heard that before? Hey, Jake, that was John Fishman playing an Electrolux vacuum cleaner. He's the drummer of Fish. They do a barbershop quartet-style song called I Didn't Know. Fishman highlights the song with an epic vacuum solo. What are the odds that the drummer for Fish would be named John Fishman? That can't be by – I mean, I know I'm new to the party here, right? I mean, I guess the only other thing would be like if you're a drummer, more naturally, you should be the drummer for Styx, right? I mean, that goes without saying.
So you're saying that John Lennon could have been John Beadle at some point? Is that what you're looking at in terms of like
right. Or John Lennon, more to use the consistent theme, John Lennon would have been better suited for some sort of a socialist Russian band, right? But John Fishman naturally had to be the drummer for Fish.
Yeah.
There was no other choice, right?
No.
They were like, so basically what this solidifies my theory, because this guy shows up and he says, hey, I want to be in the band. And they go, well, what do you do? And he says, I play the vacuum cleaner. And they're like, well, let me hear it. And he did it. And they're like, well, that sounds ridiculous. And they're like, there's no way that we can put you in this. You know, we're guys, I think they're from Massachusetts. They're like massively talented, individualized musicians. And then they say, what's your name anyway? And he says, John Fishman. And before you know it, now he's doing it in front of like 30,000 people that are all screaming and consider it to be great music. Have I played for you the clip?
I don't know that you have shared with me the clip. I only got your theater of the mind explanation, which was very strong.
If I can send the clip to Eddie, and Eddie can play over the air the solo, then I think you'll see what I'm talking about in the form of it's very odd.
I mean, it sounds odd. The entirety of the solo act itself sounds very odd.
Listen, when I'm going to send this to Eddie, and it might take him a second. Maybe we'll do it on the other side. But when you hear it, you hear this dude playing the vacuum cleaner. I mean, he's playing a vacuum cleaner. Like, kudos to him, right? More power to him.
So you had no regrets after seeing that clip of not being there? You didn't feel like, man, I missed an opportunity there?
Well, I immediately wanted to actually start vacuuming the floor, strangely enough. Mike Chappell going to join us about 15 minutes from now. We'll recap what happened in Canton. Pretty special day and a lot of great photos that came out of that. I'll explain what I'm talking about above and beyond simply Dwight Freeney's induction into the Football Hall of Fame next. Grand Park in Westfield, uptown, as a matter of fact, where you find us. Colts camp getting underway at 2 o'clock today. Shane Steichen going to join us at the bottom of the 1 o'clock hour, so just about 40 minutes from now. Shane Steichen will join us. Mike Chappell going to join us coming up in the top of the hour. A couple of real quick house cleaning items. First, when you house clean, of course, you need the Electrolux vacuum cleaner. And if your last name is Fishman, you can play it for fish. Do we have, Eddie, the clip of the guy rocking the house at the Fish concert over the weekend at Ruoff? Here we go. This is a guy. This is not me in the fourth grade with Jason Keller and Andy Burt experimenting with armpit noises. This is a guy that's at the Fish concert. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Is this Cookie Monster? Sounds like Cookie Monster at a haunted house. Okay.
So you missed out. Hey, top 5 noises.
That sounds like Sesame Street at a haunted house after going to Chi-Chi's. Right?
Top 5 noises you don't want to hear from Boo right there. I think that's
that is
best,
correct.
That's the best way to
That
describe
is correct.
That.
Also, Eddie, if we could, if you had the breaking news sounder by chance. This just in. Hey, Jake. I am the events manager at the Athenaeum. I will be spearheading all things German Fest this year, and we would love to work with you again this year as MC for our Wiener Dog races.
Let's go.
But we're renaming them this year as the Dachshund Dash at German Fest on Saturday, October 5th. Heats will be between 1 and 5:30.
Let's go.
I'm telling you, it is a highlight of the year. Lindsay Monroe from Channel 13 does it with me, and there is nothing better. If you've never been to German Fest, it is nothing but like people down there drinking huge steins of beer and the Dachshund Dash and the Wiener Dog race. The weather's always perfect. I was at the Athenaeum over the weekend because I went to the beer garden to watch the Elect on Saturday afternoon. Nothing better in downtown Indy than that. I love every single aspect of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I've not – our Dachshund Riggs, we tried him in a trial run, you'll say.
His name again?
Riggs.
Riggs, okay.
Miniature golden dachshund. We tried him in kind of a trial run in one of the smaller races around town. And I don't know that he's ready for the bright lights of German Fest, Jake, but whenever you see dachshunds take off like that in the Wiener Dog races, it's truly a sight. I'm very happy you get to be a part of that again. And, yeah, German Fest is a great time. You mentioned it. Beer, dachshund races, you got the whole nine.
They usually have a Stein holding competition, which I come up with nicknames for all the participants. And then there's also a brat eating contest, which last year we only had one recycler, which was good during the brat competition. I'm just telling you, it's great. I love everything about it. It is so much fun. And I looked, and Clemson is on the road that day at Florida State. So I'll probably be looking at my phone. I'm like, oh, they're only down 35-3. That's cool. Over the course of it. Well, I'll bet you that game, Clemson at Florida State's the ABC night game. What do you want to bet?
I would agree with you. Wouldn't fight you on that.
Colts getting back onto the practice field coming up just over an hour from now, 2 o'clock. Mike Chappell, the dean of Colts writers from CBS4 and WXIM. We have a lot to talk about, not only what is taking place today in practice and what he saw over the weekend, but also what he saw over the weekend in Ohio, because a pretty special day for the Colts organization. Dwight Freeney going into the Hall of Fame, and that meant and it's always cool to see the photos of all of the guys from that group. You know, guys also that you don't realize are still integral parts of just that social grouping and the camaraderie of the Colts, the Larry Triplets of the world, the Anthony Gonzalez. Everybody knows about, of course, Peyton Manning and Bob Sanders, who looks like he could still go out and play, by the way. All of those guys. But when you see the other players that are there taking it all in, feeling a part of it, and being embraced by those players that are truly, truly special and transitional or, generational players, it is very, very cool. Mike Chappell joins us to talk about that and what we're going to see later today at Colts Camp or look for, and he does so next. It's Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. You know what it means. Chap joins us. Although, Chap, I think you're more of a Beatles guy than Springsteen, right?
Oh, without question. Beatles.
Bob Seger,
Bob
right?
Seger.
Yeah.
Brian Adams. Yeah.
Adams is cool. Brian Adams is cool. What's your favorite Brian Adams song?
Summer of '69.
Okay.
Which is when I graduated. So.
Oh, that's cool. I always like Cuts Like a Knife because the chick in the music video dives into an empty pool and then comes out and she's soaked. I always thought it was cool.
and she's so wet.
That's right. Yeah, look at Mike. Look at Chap. All right, Chap, we got a lot to get to. And so we'll go in chronological order of your weekend. It began in Canton. We saw that Dwight Freeney was enshrined into the Hall of Fame. We knew that Jim Irsay was going to present him. There was a photo that Irsay had sent, a couple of weeks ago in his office with the Freeney jersey behind him. And that was really the first time we had seen Jim Irsay and heard from him in terms of, and I don't mean this flippantly, but just to verify his well-being to an extent after his health issues. But I did not realize that the speech that he would give for Freeney would be videotaped.
They all are.
I'm assuming. Oh, they all are? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that photo was from that day, right? When that was
probably. Again, they used to have one where the presenter would present the guy, and like Carl Peterson for like Derek Thomas or somebody, it went like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So they said, no, the presenter's got 2 minutes.
Okay.
So those were all done ahead of time. It wasn't just for Jim in his situation; it was for everybody.
So for those that do not know, Mike Chappell is not only a voter for the Hall of Fame, but the way that it works, and we've talked about this with you before, but I think people find it fascinating. For each player that is eligible, the person that is an NFL Writers Association writer, and you tell me if this is wrong the way I interpret it, that covered that player.
In that market, yes.
Then basically speaks to the other voters and sells the reasoning why they would be in, essentially, right? Now, the first question is this. Is it your job to tell, are you specifically stated, and we won't even say Mike Chappell, we'll say John Smith that covers the Houston Texans, okay? So is it his job to get up and tell specifically only the reasons why J.J. Watt should be in, or is there a level of objectivity where they say, hey, if you think he shouldn't be, tell us the reasons why he should not be in? Or is it simply to sell the merit of the player?
It's to sell the merit of the player. And again, I've seen the guy, and I've been there, and I sort of presented arguments for. I mean, Dungy, although the St. Louis guy helped me, or the Tampa guy helped Marvin and Edrin, Peyton. You stand up and say Peyton Manning, and you sit down. There's those guys.
That's what you did, didn't you?
Without question. Well, I'm not going to waste anybody's time saying, oh, by the way, yeah, you just do that. That happens once every 10 years. It does. But with these other guys, everybody's got the numbers, but why was this guy better than his numbers? Dwight Freeney's 125 sacks, that's 18th in NFL history. Well, Jared Allen has like 155. So why did Dwight get in over him? And Jared Allen was PO'd about it. But we can give a better perspective. And then after we do our 7 or 8 minutes, then the room, you take the next 10 minutes and everybody sort of, in some way, they say, well, what about this? And what, it's crazy. One time, and I'm still PO'd about this, is I'm presenting Reggie's merits a couple of years ago. And somebody from the East Coast said, well, what about that one game against the Jets in the playoffs when he had 1 target and 1 catch? And I'm thinking, that's 1 game out of, 200 and some. Right. What about the game where Brett Favre threw 6 interceptions in the playoffs? Said he would have thrown another if he had a chance. So, but there's really, really good discussion on these guys. I was very surprised with Dwight, I'll admit. We all knew locally how great of a player he was. Nationally, it was 2 times that. The reputation Dwight had for being a closer, for having the spin move, revolutionizing the position. I was a little surprised, just as I'm a little surprised that there's not more regard for Reggie.
He more so, Dwight Freeney, than certainly Jared Allen, probably more than even Marvin Harrison or Reggie Wayne. He opened a door to a different hallway, did he not?
And that's part of it.
For players that follow him.
He's 6 foot.
Correct.
He's 6 foot 260, and he was the 11th pick. The second pick that year was Julius Peppers, 6'7", 290. That's what a pass rusher was. Then all of a sudden, Dwight did open the door. So it's all of that went into it, which made Dwight going in on the second time. Which again, I think if you would have asked me that 2 years ago, I'd say he'll get in, but 3 or 4 years down the road.
When you mentioned for Peyton Manning, Mike Chappell's our guest here at Colts Camp in Grand Park. Colts getting underway at 2 o'clock. Shane Steichen at 1:30 here on the program. You had mentioned, I remember with Peyton Manning when you had to sell his virtue, I think you stood up and said, it's Peyton Manning, nothing more needs to be said, mic drop, and you sat down. That was it.
I said Peyton Manning and set the microphone down. I didn't do all what you said. I said Peyton Manning and I sat down.
Okay. So you said that happens every 10 years or so.
Right.
Off of your memory, give me the last 3 guys that took place with.
Oh, I think Brett Favre, Steve Young.
Really? Okay.
They're quarterbacks. They just
Okay.
So I don't know who the last one would have been. Jerry Rice would have been certainly.
Right.
But they're so rare, and that's why the one beef I've got with the selectors is we're putting in too many guys first ballot, and that's a part of your mind is freshest on guys
right.
you've seen most recently. Next year, Adam Vinatieri is eligible. I think you stand up and say Adam Vinatieri and sit down, but I won't because he's a kicker, and they're looked on like second-class citizens.
Kickers that are in.
Jan Stenerud.
Blanda. Morton Anderson? Blanda, I realized, was more than one position.
And Morton Anderson, and it took him 8 or 9 years.
Right.
And the kicker, Ray Guy, the best kicker the best punter of all time, he got in as a senior, which meant it took after 20 years. So, but Vinatieri, I mean,
he has the moments, right, Chap? Like,
that's
he has
the thing.
enough.
I mean, he won 2 Super Bowls. He won with his kicks, the most points and championships. And the argument I'm going to make is if I'm talking about any other player at any other position, you say his name and sit down. But the fact that he's a kicker, you're going to say, yeah, but he's a kicker. It took Devin Hester 2 or 3 years to get in. And, I don't put him on the same level as I do with Vinatieri on what they do, but Vinatieri was a level above.
Chap, I'm going to judge you here because I believe there's a definitive, clear-cut answer on this question. But if you were to list the best at each position in National Football League history, what player has the greatest separation between himself and second place?
Probably Jerry Rice.
Correct,
the numbers
right?
are ridiculous. What I hated is it sort of finished like Willie Mays, to where he played a couple of plays, and you think, man, really?
Jerry Rice is a Seahawk. Jerry Rice
but
is a
he had his
Bronco.
numbers. Whenever you judge receivers, people say, well, let's take Rice out of the equation because he was an alien, and the numbers are so crazy. But yeah, and then because running backs, I mean, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, it's.
You're right.
There's a discussion.
Barry Sanders.
Yeah. And Edgerrin. I don't put Edgerrin up there with Jim Brown, but Edgerrin's pretty damn good. But I don't know that there was another position to where there is such a clear-cut guy.
How was the celebration for Dwight Freeney in Canton?
Great. Now the celebration in the stadium was really good, but you got 7 other people or 6 other people, and they're backing too, so it's a little bit divided. What I really, really appreciate is I've been invited to the Jim Irsay's post-enshrinement party, whatever you want to call it, that night. Was there for Dungy and Marvin, and then Peyton had one, and Edgerrin, and this one. And what I like about it, first, it gives that guy his moment by himself. He's not sharing it with everybody else. But I get a chance to catch up with Colts. There had to be 30 or 40 former Colts there. And Peyton was there, and Edgerrin and Marvin. Reggie flew over. But then you've got the Tariq Glenns, Ryan Deems, Justin Snow. I'm standing there, and a guy says, how you doing? Been a while. I'm thinking, he says, James Mungro. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah. And people like that, it's really kind of cool to see. I had a long talk with Bob Sanders. I mean, he's one of the most intriguing. And I said, Bob, why won't you talk?
He lives where now?
I'm not positive.
In San Diego?
I'm not positive. Gave me his phone number, though. I guess I could call it and see what area code it is. But I said, Bob.
Chap shouldn't have let us know that.
Let me put my phone away. But I said, Bob, he said, well, why do you? First, I wanted to get his picture. He said, no, we have to take it together because he doesn't like to be the focal point. He likes to sort of be back by himself. I said, Bob, I need to talk to you and do a story. And he said, why? He said, what do you want to know about me? I said, people want to know what's up with Bob Sanders. Totally. Not a deep dive into
well, Chap, you and I talked about it on this show. I believe that of the non-Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, Edgerrin James category, he was the most popular rock star of that Super Bowl run.
Right. Now, my favorites are Edgerrin and Reggie, just because on a lot of levels, but no question. And we can argue whatever, but there's a Lombardi Trophy because of Bob Sanders and Rob Morris. People forget they put Rob Morris back in the defense too, but Bob Sanders was the driving force. He played like 4 games that year, and with all due respect to Peyton, they won that Super Bowl because of defense and the run game. Now Peyton had that crazy second half against
Dominic
the Patriots.
Rhodes was big, man.
And that's what you do. The great players, that's what they do. But over the course of that drive, it was Bob Sanders, the defense, and the run game with the die and Dom Rhodes.
You know where Bob Sanders lives, actually, Jimmy?
Where's that?
Wherever Bob Sanders wants.
You saw the picture. It looks like he could step out and play.
I know, no question.
But again, it was just to see those players. It's just really good to hook up. Gene Huey, a former coach, Jim Caldwell,
running back coach, right?
Yes, long time running backs coach. So it's really kind of cool.
The Dean Mike Chappell of Fox 9 and CBS 4 joins us. Chap, what did it mean to those former players, staff members, whoever that you talked to in Canton to be able to have Jim Irsay there at the forefront with it? Because I mean the last 8 months have been crazy, and to be able to see him now making all these public appearances, being back to on his path to getting back to full strength, and to be able to have him there still hosting that party and honoring a player so close to his heart. What did that mean to those that you spoke to?
Just that you can set eyes on him. I've talked to him a few times. He was up here in camp last week or whatever, the week before Canton, and we had 10 minutes with him, and I talked to him extensively prior to that to really get more in depth on it. But you just need, and Jake knows, you just to set your eyes on someone to where you can see. I'm not saying proof of life. I'm not going that crazy, but to see that he's up and around and he's so much is a part of this, and he wants to be more of a part of this. And, he's in a wheelchair on the stage in Canton because it was that important to be there. And I think and how he does the post party, it's not because he's Jim Irsay, it's because he wants to honor the player.
Do other franchises do that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And again, I don't want Jim Irsay to take this wrong, but the all-time best post I've been to post induction was Eddie DeBartolo, the owner of the 49ers. One I actually bumped into Jerry Rice, so I think I've got some greatness on my on my right arm. But he had Huey Lewis on the news as the concert.
Nice.
So I mean, your backdrop is Huey Lewis, so that was really kind of cool. But again, it's just really good because it's about the player. And then a lot of other Hall of Famers walk in. Marcus Allen's walking around, and Eric Dickerson was there, and Ed Reed with his beard and that hat, whatever the hat is that he wears. But that's what was cool. Like when Edgerrin had his, it was like the U reunion. They had all these former Miami players, and the people at the reception sort of mirrored that. That's how they were.
Who's the Alpha Hall of Famer? Who's the one that when all the Hall of Famers are sitting around and they got the jackets on and they're at a ceremony like that? Who is the one guy that when he walks in the room, everybody stops and is like, let's check his mood before we move on?
Jim Brown, probably. There's.
Of the I guess because he's no longer with us, right?
But he was the one that you think.
So who inherits that throne from him? Would it be
probably Jerry Rice? I mean, it's so much is about him, and that's not to downplay so many other great Peyton. But when this guy walks in, you think, man, that's effing Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
And that's what it sets you apart. And but all these guys in their gold jackets. One of the coolest things I've ever been to, I didn't go this year, but they have their gold jacket club, or gold jacket presentation on Friday night in downtown Canton. And that's when the players officially get their gold jackets. And the way they do it is at an auditorium in Canton Civic Center. And all the Hall of Famers that are there form like a gauntlet. And the guy walks down this gauntlet of gold jackets to get his gold jacket. It is really neat. It's a fraternity. It's a tight group. And that's why it's so important for me to get like Reggie in next year, I hope, because I want these guys to be recognized, not just how great they were as a Colt, and Reggie was, but over the course of his career. And people seem to dismiss what Reggie did.
Does post-playing career impact? I mean, I know it's not supposed to, but Reggie Wayne staying involved in the game and coaching players, does that impact?
No, you could have and even if negatively, not really, because they're supposed to be on field. But no, not really.
Could Robert? So you don't think Robert Mathis could be impacted by links to questionable news stories over the last several months?
No, but before all of this has come up, Robert's had a difficult time getting traction. I don't know why, because locally, we could have and probably have had the debate of who's better, Mathis or Freeney.
Right.
I mean, and you could argue that locally, and nationally that's not the case. Robert's been eligible to be Hall of Famer for the last 2 years, I think, and has not made the cut to 20. Maybe he's made the cut to 25 once. Part of that's Freeney being in there, but for whatever reason nationally, there's just not that traction for Robert. And again, the all-time NFL leader in forced fumbles. It's Robert Mathis, all time.
Which Colts Hall of Famer, Chap, would you say has? I'm sure they've all had great gratitude, but which one had the most sense of gratitude and relief upon enshrinement?
Relief. Edgerrin, maybe.
Yeah.
I think Peyton was. Peyton is such a historian, and he understands. He made it a point to be back for the ceremonies, and Edgerrin, I think, because again, I think people finally acknowledged how special he was as a player. But they all appreciate it. I'm still PO'd that it took Marvin 3 years.
Right.
I mean, this is the top 5
Which is
all-time.
insane, right? Yeah.
He's a top all-time, top 5 receiver. But he had to wait for Andre Reed and then Tim Brown, I think it was. So, but once you get and it's funny. I talked to Reggie on Saturday, and his frustration is off the charts. I can't repeat what he said, but once he gets in, it won't matter that he had to wait 5 or 6 years. Edgerrin said that. Edgerrin was upset about the process and the pony show that he called it. But once you get in, they don't ask. Well, and Edgerrin James, who got in on this 6th time, they don't mention that. Once you're in, you're in.
Right.
But the process of having to wait for whatever reason, it's really stressing on the players, and it's wearing Reggie's ass out. It is. I know it is. I hope that, and again, he promises a great celebration. His speech will be second to none. They may have to bleep him a little bit because Reggie's Reggie. But
is it not a matter of if but when at this stage?
I think so.
You say?
I think so. But the problem is, if not this year, and we're going to have another pretty good group again with Vinny. There's going to be a great debate about Eli Manning. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
My favorite trivia question.
I agree with you on that.
Eli Manning, is Eli eligible this coming year?
Yes.
Is that right? So, Eli Manning, if now we would say, let's say he doesn't get in, that makes only 2 quarterbacks to start in multiple Super Bowl wins that are not in, and he would join Jim Plunkett. Jim Plunkett and Eli Manning would be the only multiple. So
Tom Brady, who's not eligible.
But I'm saying amongst the eligible, right? Plunkett's the only that has been bypassed that has multiple rings as a starter, and so the precedent is, Manning. You're right. Eli isn't. If his name's Eli Chappell and he has the exact same career, is he in the discussion?
What he did during those runs, though, to both those Super Bowls.
That's the problem. You got the 2 Super Bowl runs.
Yeah.
And I don't believe he won another playoff game.
I think you're right on that.
And yet people said, well, you can't, can you tell the story of the NFL without this guy? And you really can't without Eli because of what he did. He
stiff-armed Brady from 2 titles.
If nothing else, he kept the Patriots from going unbeaten. So, but does that outweigh the fact that the other years he was never, even in those years, he was never probably a top 5 quarterback. But those
and he's another one that I'm not going to say like Willie Mays is a Met, but the very last 5% of it was totally different than the previous 95%.
Right. And I think his record as a starter is just about 500, like 86 and 84.
Yeah.
But it's that big but I got 2 Super Bowls.
And the way he won them, I've always thought those 2 runs would be enough. Yes, the name definitely helps Jake. I don't disagree with you on that. But
Namath.
He's probably more than Namath. Namath, he won the game.
Right.
He won the game.
Namath secured it when he's running off the field doing that for the Jets, right?
But you look at other quarterbacks and you look at his stats. Was Namath that great? No. Go take a second and look at Bob Greasy's career stats.
Right.
I mean, really. You'd say, who is this guy and why is he in the Hall of Fame?
Well, Bob Greasy gets in just because when they played the great Monday night game against the Houston Oilers when Earl Campbell went crazy, And Greasy at one point had a touchdown pass and took off his helmet and then looked like everybody's industrial arts teacher.
Right.
So that alone, you're like, well, that's cool. And he's from Evansville, right?
Right.
Mike Chappell is our guest. Chap, before Shane Steichen's going to join us here in about 10 minutes. But yesterday, the conversation was pretty good day for the defense yesterday. Offense struggled a little bit in terms of Colts camp. Do we look at it that way? Do we say the offense struggled, or do we say, hey, kudos defense, or did the defense look good because the offense wasn't? Which way do you take it?
I was talking to Gus Bradley about that the other day. It's funny. I said whenever one side has a good day, the other side is bitching and moaning because they didn't. Well, let's credit the one side that had a good game. I would be more encouraged that the defense had more good days because I really think the offense is going to be there. I think this somewhat inconsistencies we've seen with Richardson as far as accuracy, isn't that him? Isn't that what we're going to see at least early, where he's going to be 60%, and he's going to throw some in the dirt, and he's going to make some plays you can say, holy crap, look at that play. I think early, because remember, he's played 4 games. He's thrown 84 passes. He's got so much room to grow. We're going to see rookie mistakes this year because he didn't play enough. But I'm not too concerned about an offense that's got Richardson, Pittman, and that really good group of receivers. Jonathan Taylor. Remember, they were together for 2 plays last year, 2. And I really think Taylor's going to have a really, really good season if he stays on the field. I'm not saying 1,800 yards, but 1,200 yards, an average 5 yards a carry, and these guys will be fine if the defense can do its part.
Are there guys, do we have to be cautious based on precedent of years past, Chap? A.D. Mitchell, when he has really good days in camp, more often than not, when you look at young, especially receivers in their first camp, does a really good camp usually lead to a precursor of what that rookie year is going to be like, or more often than not, do you get into the regular season and go, yeah, I can tell now that was just camp?
We've seen a lot of players like that. Remember Caesar Rayford led the NFL in sacks one year, and he really wasn't very good.
Right.
And the Colts actually got a draft pick for him. But Josh Downs had a good off-season, preseason, and then he had a great rookie camp. But I remember back, whether it was camp or off-season work, where we saw Michael Pittman, and the guy that looked better was Mike Strawn.
Mike Strawn, yeah, he had all the.
He had everything. And
he had Roy Hall, right? Those two guys.
Roy Hall. Remember, people who remember Roy Hall, that's when they started drafting receivers had size. Was he a semi-tight end at Ohio State? But that year, Michael Strawn, I think he was number 10. And Pittman's the number 11. And if you didn't know who was drafted where, you'd think, boy, number 10's pretty good. And number 11, he's okay. And then things take over. So, yeah, you don't want to have – I don't think it's really great to be the training camp king. I've always wanted to go back and look who led the team in receiving and rushing during preseason, and how many times did that player make the team. So we'll see how – and, again, the big thing moving forward, we'll find out this week, is how much do these guys play in these preseason games. Maybe Shane will talk to you guys about that. He mentioned midweek. But do they need to play? Does Richardson need to play? They say reps are important, and he missed a lot of reps last year. But I don't want to see Taylor out there. I just don't. Maybe Edgernoy said maybe one hit. Peyton said one hit.
Is there a tenure line, like a clear tenure line of, hey, you've been here for so long?
Yeah, probably, and that's why you have X number of rookies on your rosters so they can have they can take the hits. I don't need to see Jonathan Taylor. I never want that first hit to be in September, but too much. Michael Pittman, no. Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell, maybe. But you know what these guys can do. I wouldn't put the defense out there too much. I don't want to lose. You've already lost Ebukam, which was a huge loss. Yeah. You're going to have injuries. Look across the league. I don't want these injuries to happen. They might have more
depth with the Ebukam injury than we thought, though, right? If Liatu is ready to play.
Right, but you don't want to start losing your depth in training in the third-day training camp. But no question, and hopefully they come out of this in good shape. There's so much interest in this team, but it's all going to come down to number five. Can he win the games that he needs to win? Can he limit the mistakes? So much in the way they've done things off-season-wise with signings and all this. They tell you that number 5, they're really putting a lot of pressure on him.
Lastly, what are we looking for today?
Just another step. I don't know whether I don't think they're in pads today, but
it's a little humid.
It's a little humid, but it's amazing. We sit on the sidelines and we're bitching and moaning about the heat, and these guys are out there in pads or shells, and they're working for an hour and a half, and it's amazing. But you just want to see the offense and the quarterback have consistency and have control and just run. I go back again, Manning, which is not good, but there were days of football never hit the ground. They were that good. We're not there, but you want to get to where you see daily consistency from the quarterback.
All right, we'll see what happens. Practice getting away 2 o'clock, by the way. Shane Steichen set to join us next. Chap, appreciate it as always, and especially the insights on Canton, man. Good stuff. Appreciate it as
Appreciate
always.
it, guys.
Mike Chappell from CBS 4 and WXIN 59. Again, we are at Colts camp as they are set to get underway at 2 o'clock today. No camp tomorrow, just a reminder on that. And then on Wednesday, 9 in the morning is when camp gets underway. So things getting busy here at Colts camp. They're starting to line things up, and guys are starting to come out and show up. And Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Colts, is set to join us next. We'll do it on the other side as we are live at Grand Park. You're listening to Aquarium Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Of having Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, join us at Grand Park for Colts camp, which gets underway at 2 o'clock. And that is that, Coach, the media all knows. They're like, man, Shane Steichen, this guy's all ball. He's all business. He's football. He's locked in. So based on that, I love that. So I figured in having you on, just get right to it, right? Because you're locked in. So we're going to lock in with you. First thing I want to know in this camp, how things are going, but more importantly, I'm curious from your standpoint, what's the thing that's keeping you reversing the film? What's the thing that you just feel like is the hurdle that you still haven't gotten a hold of with this group?
I don't know if there's truly a hurdle. I think it's really, I hit the guys this morning in the team meeting about the details of this game, the finer details that go into it, the route discipline, the communication up front on both sides of the football, the communication on the back end. And it starts with us as coaches putting those guys in position and what we want done out there, and then let their talent shine. And, we got a lot of good players on this football team right now that I'm extremely excited about for this football season, but we got to keep working through those things.
For you personally in year two, you came into this camp in what way different than year one?
I think it's an understanding of our football team more than anything, knowing the guys, knowing their personalities. I think that's a big part of coaching is understanding who you're dealing with. There's different personalities. I don't think you can coach every guy the same way. There's certain ways. There's guys tick, little things you say to them in a different way. And really just the operation of everything, even the building, you know what I mean? Just the ins and outs of the training room and the weight room and how guys do things and how they operate and how I want it done around the building. So I think that's been really big for me, and so far so good. Going into this training camp has been really smooth.
Coach, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that, and I loved the quote, by the way, but you told the media that with Anthony Richardson, much like Steph Curry, you're not going to take away his ability to shoot a three-pointer. With Anthony Richardson and all the film that you've watched, where has been the biggest area of growth since his college days as a runner, and where does he continue to need to evolve and grow as a runner?
Yeah, I think with anything, there's a time and a place, right? As a runner, when you got to have it, you got to go get it. And I've said this before in the past. It's hey, it's 1st and 10, and we drop back to throw it, or it's play action, and you're scrambling, and you got a chance to go make it 2nd and 4 and take a big hit, or make it 2nd and 6 and go for the next down. Hey, let's make it 2nd and 6. Let's not try to get the 2 extra yards right there, unless we're 4th and goal at the 5, and you got to go make a play.
Now, with that, when you talk about, because this guy's clearly a weapon in Anthony Richardson. He is a unicorn to a great extent. But the thing that I'm curious about is when you think of him as a runner, what % of that is designed run play, and what % of that is teaching him to have that internal clock where now it's time to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. Within our system, we have true quarterback design runs where it's like, hey, you're keeping it no matter what. This is on you. But then within that, you have the zone read game, a part of it too. So there might be games where we have it up and he's getting pull reads to where it's like, shoot, go make a play. And there's other times where we're going to, hey, JT, go get it. You know what I mean? So that's a big part of it is understanding the game plan and what we're trying to get done. And again, do we want to abuse him as a runner? Of course not. Of course not. We're going to be smart, but that is an element in his game that it makes it really hard on defense, and he's an incredible runner. So, we just don't want to get away from that element of his game.
Shane Steichen, our guest, the head coach of the Colts. I'm assuming you've watched Family Feud in the course of your lifetime, right?
Yes.
So we're going to play Family Feud real quick. Top 3 answers are on the board, okay? The Indianapolis Colts in August of 2024 right now, 3 best wide receiver options. Top 3 answers on the board.
Well, I'm not going to go there. I think we got a lot of good options on the board because I feel good about the group in general. I really do. There's a lot of guys. Obviously, Michael Pittman is the staple in that room. Downs had a big year. Alex coming along like crazy. He's making big plays down the field. We added A.D. Mitchell. We got Anthony Gould. We got some other guys in the fold. I mean, Ashton Doolin's back. I mean, we got a great group of wideouts.
That was a great way to ask that question, though, wasn't
it? Yeah. Try to get me there.
We thought going in that there was going to be I get it. Some of it's narrative driven and some of it is reality, but we thought there might be a position battle at that 3rd wide receiver spot with Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell coming in. Where do their styles compare and contrast? And is there a world where it's situational where you see those 2 receivers utilized?
Yeah, I see both those guys making impacts for us. I really do. Alec he's made some big time plays out here in training camp, and you can see the separation that AD brings. At the top of routes. I mean, they're both going to have huge impact for us this year.
Which is a bigger challenge from a coaching standpoint? Getting a new young quarterback, and Anthony Richardson is still that, obviously, familiar with his receivers, or getting the receivers familiar with his tendencies?
I think Anthony getting familiar with the receivers is a big part of it. You know what I mean? Not everyone runs the same. You know what I mean? There's little nuances to everyone running certain routes. Like we have our details, we have our depths, we have our alignments where we want guys, but some guys might have a little bit more shake at the top on a 1-2 coming out of it. You know what I mean? Or a speed out. And just the body language is huge for a quarterback, seeing those guys, and that's why we spend so much time in the offseason with routes on air and then routes out here, and then you get into those situations where it's, hey, it's press man, and here we go. This guy, how's he going to run it versus press? How's he going to run it versus press? And just knowing their body language.
When you look back at year one as a head coach in the NFL and you evaluate it, did you find that you were more often than not having a tendency to game plan to opponent or simply coming up with what you had and then forcing the opponent to game plan to you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think with anything, as when we game plan as a staff, and it's people say this, it's like it's our offense, like it's ours, like it's an offensive staff's offense. We have so many good coaches, and when we're looking at those different things, we're trying to do whatever we can to put our guys in the best position first and foremost. And then you want to get your playmakers the ball. I mean, that is a priority. We'll always have things up for certain guys each week so they can get their touches. And sometimes it's like with anything, there's one football, right? Sometimes you don't have enough to go around, and you try to get those guys the ball, and it's just you got to be selfless in those situations because, like I said, like Pitt might have 12 catches one week, and he might flip around and have 4, and then Downs has 10 that week. You know what I mean? So as long as we're all selfless in that situation and we're winning football games, that individual success will happen because we're going to have team success.
Colts head coach Shane Steichen is our guest. Coach, maybe it winds up being Jelani Woods or Kylan Granson or Mo Ali Cox, and I'm obviously not going to ask you a question that would disparage any of that room, but what would a true tight end number 1 or an every down tight end, kind of like Dallas Goedert was for you in Philly, do for your offense if you're able to find that?
Yeah, it's huge. I think we have a good group of tight ends, and all have different talents that we can use. The true tight ends that you've seen around, the best ever do it. They can run, obviously, block in the run game, and then win the one-on-ones on the outside. But I feel really, really good about that group. Again, like I said, they all have different talents, but we got to utilize those talents in certain situations.
Which one of them has the most diverse skill set?
Gosh, I mean, that's a hard question to answer just because I feel good about all of them. I do. You know what I mean? I don't want to single a guy out that I don't, because they're all competing right now, and I feel good about the group.
Which, between offensive line and defensive line, well, we'll just begin with the offensive line. Your overall impressions thus far, they're healthy, it's seemingly, which is good, but are you happy with the depth there?
I am. I feel really good about the depth. I feel really good with our first 5 guys that we got, and then the backups. Blake Freeland's coming along. You add Matt in the draft. You add Bordellini in the draft. Danny Penner's back. We got French back. It's been really good to see, but I feel really, really good about both offensive and defensive lines going into the season.
And I was going to say, the defensive line, obviously you have an injury in terms of your defense so far. We hope that's the only one, but Liatu Latu looks like he gives you automatically maybe some depth earlier, or is it dangerous to put too many eggs in a young basket?
I mean, we'll see. I mean, he's ultra talented. You can see it on the practice field. It'll be good to see him in some preseason games rushing the passer, but he's just got a relentless motor. He really does, and that's what showed up on tape. I kind of look at it like what's going to give an offense the most problems as I'm watching these guys in the draft. And he was a guy that just was relentless coming after the football. You know what I mean? And even if he dip inside and see a guy in a quarterback scrum, I mean, he is gone, and he's going after him. So that was really good to see. But feel good with the defensive line with Buck and Grove inside there, and then obviously adding Latu on the outside edge. And you got Dio and Quiddy and Taekwon. So feel really good about that group.
Coach, we're used to it by now, but with the preseason having shifted a couple years ago from 4 games to 3 games, and there's always talk of if that shrinks again, if the league expands to 18 games, what do you find most important in these preseason games? Is it rust off for the starters? Is it just these on the margins position battles of guys fighting for a roster spot? And how do you adequately divvy all that up with it just being 3 preseason games to your belt?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's good for the starters to get a little bit of time in there, whether it's first game, second game, or third game, just to get them in, get them through the pregame warm-up, going through the operation of that. But it is great for evaluating guys in a game-like situation for those second, third guys, the undrafted free agents. You find these guys, you see them in camp, but then to get them in game-like situations in the preseason is really big for that.
When you look at being a head coach in the NFL, and I hope this is probably going to sound like really dumb, right? But in the course of a season, 17 games, how many different teams realistically are you coaching?
How many different teams?
In other words, does a team have to make adjustments and change itself over the course of a season because of attrition, because of all of those things? And do you have to schematically be available to do a lot of different things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of say this. I've said this a lot, and even as a position coach, as a coordinator, as a head coach, you find out about your football team early on in the season. You know what I mean? You got things that you put them in position for, and then sometimes if it ain't working out, it's our job as coaches, right, to flip the script and say, like, hey, we need to be more of this going forward. You know what I mean? You got to make those, changes on the fly, and a lot of in-game situational things that come up, adjustments, like those are happening on the sideline so fast. You know what I mean? We have our, halftime adjustments, but really those things are happening in between series, which are big for us. And then obviously when you get to the bye, we got a late bye this week, but those bye weeks are big too to kind of really evaluate where you're at. Obviously you're going to have tendencies on both sides of the football. It's part of the game, but you got to try to break those tendencies as well so the other team's not getting a beat on you.
What's your impression on the safety position?
It's a good group. We're battling back there. Julian's done a hell of a job right there. Obviously, he's a staple for us back there right now. Nick Cross, Ronnie Harrison, Rodney Thomas, Trevor Denbo. We're rotating those guys right now, and we're going to find out, at the end of this camp, who's going to be the guy back there.
So that is still a position that's relatively open.
Yeah, those guys are competing, and we're going to keep finding out. I mean, we're going to week 3 of training camp right now, and we got some preseason games coming up, and those guys are just going to compete.
What have you learned about leadership?
I think the biggest thing, just looking at leadership, and I talked to our leadership council about this, like the number one leadership quality to me is character, and it's one of our 4 pillars. We got character, preparation, consistency, and relentless. But being a great character person and doing things the right way, because, there's different forms of leadership, right? There's the vocal guys that talk. There's guys that do it with their actions. But at the end of the day, it's about being a good person. And I think if you're a good person and you're the guy that's showing up early and you're helping out and you're being selfless, it's like, hey, what's up today? Instead of saying, hey, what's up? It's like, how can I help you today? What do you need, right? That's being a great teammate, and that's being a leader too.
Where can you spot it in the course of a practice? You got an hour and a half today when you're working, you're practicing. Give me an example of something that a guy does and you go, that's it.
Yeah, I think, obviously it's going to be hot out here today, and we're going to have to fight through some things, you know what I mean? And it's going to be like, shoot, if whether offense is doing some good things or bad things, whatever it is, if someone's struggling, that leader says, hey, come on, guys, that ain't it. Let's pick it up. The peer-to-peer accountability it's tremendously huge in professional sports. Because as a coach, as a head coach, it's my job to hold guys accountable. That's what I got to do. But when it comes player to player, that's when it takes on a whole nother life. I mean, I've looked back and seen, when Peyton was here, and Marvin and Reggie and Edge and all those guys. Like, you see these clips of those guys, and they have some back and forth, but because they want to win so bad. Right. And they're holding each other to a high standard. And I think when that happens, your team takes off.
And with that, over the course of the practices out here, give me a guy that maybe fans aren't wearing the jersey of, but you look at it and you go, I love the fact that guy's on my team because that guy represents what the Colts, what I want them to be. Give me a guy.
That's a good question. You know what? I mean, EJ Speed, being with Zaire in the middle right there, he just keeps coming on and coming on and coming on. And Zaire is a vocal guy that plays hard and he holds guys accountable. And him and EJ together in the middle, I mean, it's been tremendous to see that. So they're just going to keep growing together, those two guys inside, and it's going to help our defense a huge bit.
How much Anthony Richardson do we wind up seeing on Sunday? And as you map this out, do you have it mapped out for snap counts for him or the last 3 games of the preseason?
Yeah, we're going to make that decision middle of this week. So we'll have that all.
His comfort level, Anthony Richardson's. Can you see a difference from a year ago?
Absolutely. I think, you can make a big jump from year 1 to year 2. And, Peyton Manning said this, right? The best teacher is experience, And so he's got an opportunity to go experience his second year, but even just the off season, right? It's your second year of doing the off season, the second year of training camp, being around the guys is huge. So I really just want to see the growth from him, each day getting better, and then throughout the season, week 1, let's make a jump, week 2, let's make a jump, week 3, boom, 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 and just keep growing. Keep growing as a player, keep growing as a leader.
If his chart is a roller coaster from week 1 to week 17 of up and down, but it's slowly progressing so that by the end you see more peaks than you do valleys, would that be an ideal second year for him?
Yeah, obviously you don't want to see those
Right,
peaks and stuff, but you want to see the peaks, not the valleys. But yeah, there's going to be with any player, right? You're going in. Quarterback's the hardest position in sports to play, and he's going to make some phenomenal plays, and he's going to have plays that he has that you learn from, right? You learn from those plays because not everything's going to be perfect out there. It's a hard position to play, but again, we just want to see the growth week in and week out.
I think one of the things that's hard for Shane Steichen's our guest, the Colts head coach. Colts getting underway 2:00 today at Grand Park here in Westfield. For any athlete in any sport, it's difficult sometimes if a guy is so athletically gifted that he can rely on that versus instinct and vision, if you will. I'm not saying Richardson doesn't have those last two. We know he has the first. Is it hard to teach instinct and feel?
I think that is a God-given ability.
Does he have it?
Oh, yeah. He has it. He definitely has it for sure. And I think you don't want to take that like ever away from him because there's things that come up in a game to where it might be, here's your reads, and all of a sudden someone's just uncovered and he throws it to him. And it's like, well, no one was covering him, coach. I'm like, that's instinct. That's feel. Those are the best players that I've ever been around, right? We have rules. We have assignments. We have a playbook. But sometimes when you get out there, it ain't going to be perfect. And then that's when your God-given talent's got to take over.
Do you find yourself more in watching him over the course of a day saying, are there more plays where you go, whoa, that's it, or more plays where you go, okay, I need to go back to him and go over that one because that
yeah, I mean, with anything, there are a lot of wow plays out there, but with anything, you're still going through it. It's his second year, you know what I mean, where you're coaching off the tape and saying, hey, shoot on this one, we don't need to force that. We can check it down, or you can take off if you get a hole and then get down. So that's an ongoing process daily, yeah.
Okay, in terms of today's workout, people that are going to be coming out, they're going to be here at 2 o'clock, things getting underway. We're looking for what, and you saw what yesterday that you want to either improve on or carry off of?
Well, yesterday was a lot of call-up periods. We got another call-up period, a couple call-up periods today, and we're going to end with a 2-minute.
Now, a call-up period is what?
Call-up period, no scripts. We're just going out like a game.
That's like this show.
Yeah, offense on the sideline,
like
defense on the sideline. We're calling in personnel, communicating like a game and we're going and we're playing football. Let's put the ball down. We're moving the ball, and then we're going to end with a 2-minute into game. Offense is down by 8. 46 seconds left. Ball's going to be on the plus 25-yard line. All right, no timeouts, and the offense got to score and get a 2-point conversion, and it's great. It's great for everybody.
Now, that sounds scripted.
No, that's the situation. That's the scenario we're putting these guys in, and it's great not only for the players but for the coaches. I mean, you got to make fast, quick decisions down there. You got no timeouts, balls in bounds. You got to be on the ball. Boom. Quarterback's got to be smart in those situations. So it's great to learn off those things, especially, I mean, you look at the NFL around the league. I mean, 2-minute, it comes down to a 2-minute situation, I feel like, every week. You know, whether it's into half or into game is going to, dictate the game. So to get those situations in practice and put these guys in those positions is huge.
Were you pleased with it yesterday? I mean, the call it, and in what areas did you go, okay, we got to call that differently?
Yeah, I did. I was pleased with it. A lot of back and forth. I think the guys fought through some things. You know, it's hot out here. Obviously, we were in full pads yesterday. We're going to have another hot one today. I really want to see them fight through those things, you know what I mean? Because in the fourth quarter, it's going to be hard, and guys are going to be grinding through things, and that's where it's at.
Well, Coach, we'll let you get to it. You are right. We wanted you to make sure that you feel you grew up in – kind of northern central California and Sacramento. I want you to feel at home with the heat here, right?
No, it's perfect.
It's a little more humid, I think.
A little more humid, but I do feel a little bit at home.
It's you go over to Geist, it's just like Tahoe. Very similar, right?
Right.
Very
That's
similar.
right.
Coach, we appreciate it as always, and wish you the best of luck. Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, is again. We are at Grand Park. Practice getting underway 2 o'clock today. As we told you, tomorrow will be an off day, and then on Wednesday 9 a.m. if I'm not mistaken, 9 a.m. everything gets underway. We'll take a quick recess. We'll come back, reset it, and go over what we heard from Shane Steichen as you're listening to Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. ask about that fish. Gorman, you a Fish fan? Yeah, the band. See, that's why Gorman is my spirit animal. Exactly. Jeff Gorman knows what's up. Like, that guy knows music, right?
I'd say so. Yeah.
He knows music and greatness, but he's with me. He's like, wait a minute, a guy's playing a vacuum cleaner? Nah, hard pass on that. We are at Grand Park at Colts Camp here in Westfield. Shane Steichen, a pleasure to have him on. That was a good conversation. He was very cool. Stuck around for a little bit afterwards and elaborated a little bit just on it sounded like he was pretty excited. Not the receiver depth, I think, is an area where he seems very optimistic and enthusiastic. But, you know, the other thing that I noticed about him I've never had before, he looks like John Ritter.
Yeah.
He looks like a thinner version of the late, great John Ritter from Three's Company. But I thought if you were to go back and look at that conversation, some of the things that kind of jumped out, if you will, Jimmy, one of the areas where he just basically admitted is the wrong word, but where he was open about an open competition. And we'll talk about exactly that and what Shane Steichen had or said to us in one of the areas where he feels he's looking at what he has and he realizes that it needs to stay open in competition. We'll go over that on the other side when we return to Colts Camp and live in Grand Park in Westfield, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. relatively warm Westfield. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's relatively warm everywhere in the Eastern time zone right now. But the humidity level, Jimmy, what did we say the humidity level was?
I saw 63% last night.
Well, it feels every bit of that. I can assure you of that. You ever watch that Naked and Afraid?
I have seen Naked and Afraid before, yes. I'm not a regular viewer, but I have seen it.
Naked and Afraid, for those that are unaware, it's on, I think, Discovery. But they take two people, and they go and they live for either 14 or 21 days in the wild, and they're completely naked. They're allowed to take, like, one item. And then when you leave, if it gets to the point where you just can't do it anymore, then that's what they call tap, right? I'm going to tap out and go home. And I think the number one thing that causes people to tap, it's not hunger, it's not heat, it's not cold, it's not illness, it's bugs.
I would agree.
People just get to the point where they're like, okay, enough with the bugs. And let me tell you, I can relate currently, right?
I thought that was the reason I don't get down with that show. I thought that was the whole point of technological advancements and evolution was, to
not
respect
have to do
where
that?
we've been but not go back.
That's right. That's fair.
So.
Well, we're coming to you live from Grand Park or Baton Rouge, depending on which way you want to look at it here. Shane Steichen joined us at just a couple of minutes ago, and a couple of things that he said, and I thought his answer regarding the safety position was very interesting, because if you look at that interview, and I think he knew that it was coming. Look, he was really cool, and he was cool afterwards as well. But when I asked the question Family Feud style and said top three answers on the board, your top three options at wide receiver are, and he did sing the praises of Alec Pierce and the plays that Alec Pierce has made in camp. But he kind of deflected, obviously, having to pinpoint who the clubhouse leader is, like at the number 3 spot, by basically saying, look, we've got some riches at that position and we're happy with that. When I asked him about the safety position, he had the opportunity to kind of give the same answer, but he did not. He was open about the fact that that is still an open competition. Certainly sounds like Julian Blackmon is the guy that has stood out. But now he didn't mention my boy Sliva, right?
No, we didn't pin him on that one. We probably should have in hindsight.
I know, but I wanted to continue the interview.
Yeah.
But I thought he was very open about the fact that that is a position that is simply wide open, right?
I think that definitively Julian Blackmon has a starting spot. The question is, would they actually consider working him as their full-time free safety? We saw that a little bit at practice last week. We talked to Stephen Holder about that last week. And if not, then you have him as a solid strong safety like he was last year when he has a career year. Look, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I appreciate the transparency and the honesty there from Shane Steichen, but this is a group where the cornerback room, even though we didn't go in depth with him on that, Jake, has inexperience on it. Juju Brent's pushed back on us about that last week in regards to they have some dogs out there, and they for sure do. There's going to be growth year over year in the NFL, but without Samson Ebukam, your pressure is either extended entirely up front with guys like Latu Latu needing to play a larger role, or you're needing additional growth in the secondary. And it feels like the entire calendar year of 2024, we've been asking questions about, is there a veteran that's going to be brought in at the cornerback position, or a veteran that's going to be brought in at the safety position? So the idea that there's still plenty of camp in front of us in the entire preseason left, that it is still basically an open competition for what the definitive starting setup is at safety is understandable.
Yeah, the second part you mentioned there, I think is the key, and that is the possibility of what does happen with once other teams have made their roster moves, right? I mean, I think there are certain positions, Jimmy, that you look at from an NFL standpoint and you simply say to yourself, look, we like where we are, but we're not panicking because it's one that good players are going to be available. And this franchise has had success. And at the safety position of note, being able to get guys that were either salary crunch or last-minute wave or coming off injury-type guys elsewhere that come in and can give you and give you some insurance at that position. Yeah. And I do think that the safety position, especially free safety, a lot of positions in football and in sport in general, a great percentage of success for a player comes off of the feel for the other players and the chemistry for the other players and the timing for the other players on the field. The offensive line is a prime example of that. I think a lot of times when guys that are offensive linemen miss a lot of time in camp, it takes them longer to mold in because so much of the line is based upon or reliant upon watching and feeling what the other line is doing, where they are positioned, what their angles are, when you need to come over and help and you don't. If you are a free safety, you're the center fielder.
You're basically the last line of defense.
Correct.
In a passing situation.
So you are truly, if there is a position on the football field that is the most isolated from everybody else, it would be free safety. So for that reason, it is the position that probably has the least acclimation time that you can just plug a guy in and say, okay, go. Because you're sitting back anyway and you're watching over and observing everything happening before you. I mean, yeah, sure, you go off of that, but you're not as reliant on basically having to feel what a guy's doing because you're watching what a guy's doing.
Right.
So I think it is the one position. If there was a situation in building a roster of a position where you say, what's the one where we can allow ourselves the most flexibility of last-minute drop-in spot, it would be that position. So that's the one that, even though I think he talked about, and I think Shane Steichen, when talking about the safety position, you know, he was pretty open there about, he didn't hesitate necessarily to mention Julian Blackmon's name.
And if you
but he also was open about the fact it's open, that it's open.
Right. And if I don't know, this is why we're wearing these headsets and he wears those headsets, right? I don't know what the direct answer is, but if it's a group in the whole secondary, not just the free safety or strong safety position, but the entire cornerback room, if the question is for your last line of defense, where the best anchor is for that last line of defense, and Julian Blackmon was so great as a strong safety last year, but it might wind up being the best answer for this team is having him and his veteran presence as your last line of defense back there.
I think Blackmon, assuming that he stays healthy, he's the guy, right?
I mean, he's definitively one of the guys. The question is he strong safety again like it was last year, or do they find that they need to utilize him in a different setting?
And in addition to that, there are two things about him that you have to take into consideration. One of them is his health and his long-term, you know, Blackmon. I think when Blackmon's been healthy, he's been a really good player.
Yes.
But you have to take into account how long you're going to have him, so to speak. And then the second thing that you take into consideration is just the health of the unit in general, because it is one position where you do see guys that get nicked up and knocked out, right?
Yes. Yeah, and it's just there are so many – he mentioned this, Jake. There's so many little things defensively for this team where they're going to have to win in the margins, and that's magnified with the injury to Samson Ebukam. That's not to say that Latu can't necessarily fill that void, or maybe you get stronger performances from Dio Dengbo or another growth year from Kwity Paye, but this defense is so predicated on what happens up front that now more than ever, with Ebukam out of the picture, unless Latu is going to light the world on fire like some have claimed he has the skill set to do, you need to have anchors in the secondary. You have one in Juju Brents. In all likelihood, you have one in Kenny Moore. Back there, though, once you get further back behind the defense, Julian Blackmon, I think, is your best bet.
That position in general, and Blackmon as kind of the incumbent, the overall room itself, the one area, I guess, that if you had to nitpick the issue with having a safety battle in camp is it is tough and this is a nitpick, Jimmy, but when you are also trying to develop a young quarterback, there would be a desire there to having like a really strong, already set in place defensive backfield so that he is going against solidarity and consistency each and every day, and you know what you're putting up against your young quarterback.
And the other side of that coin, Jake, to flip it on its head, from a defensive standpoint, when you have a room that has been described as young, as inexperienced outside of Juju Brents and Kenny Moore in the secondary, you want Anthony Richardson to be at his best, because if he has these rookie struggles, how do you properly evaluate what's happening in the secondary?
Right.
If they're just picking him apart on overthrows, where's the growth come from?
Yeah,
Where's the
that's right.
challenge for either position group? The other thing that Shane Steichen mentioned that, again, I gave the caveat because, we had tried the family feud route, and I knew he wasn't going to throw any of his position players under the bus. But it's clear, at least from maybe you've heard it differently. I had validation talking with him that, of course, what else would you expect him to say? He wants a tight end number one in that room. He knows how beneficial it would be to be able to have that for Anthony Richardson's development. And he has, as he put it, a lot of guys that do things very well. We've never questioned that. What we've questioned is there an opportunity for a Kylan Granson or a Mo Alley Cox, or maybe it's finally Jelani Woods, to have enough separation where they're doing more than just a couple of things well. They're doing things good to great. And the whole rumors from last week when we discussed with Eddie about Hard Knocks and whether or not they tried to trade up, who knows? Maybe they legitimately were having Brock Bowers on the mind. And maybe that was a massive goal during the draft.
I mean, you would think,
to go
right?
get a number one tight. I mean, we talked about it. Maybe it was a Dunze, whoever. But the point is, the fact that they were willing to trade up for an offensive weapon, or at least try to, because that appeared to be what they were trying to do with the Giants, means that this staff, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard as the general manager, want to add as much weapons as possible for their unicorn quarterback. I don't think that's slowing down anytime soon.
Another thing that Shane Steichen talked about, and he's exactly right in this, but you don't oftentimes, maybe I'm naive, hear coaches talk this specifically about it. Now, have you ever been, Jimmy, involved in, maybe a year ago you were, I can't recall if we talked about it, a confidence pool? A pick-em confidence pool?
Yeah.
So I'm in a pick-em confidence pool. Stephen Holder, by the way, you going to the beach? Stephen's got on his swim trunks. Those are nice.
I'm at the beach without the water, apparently.
Yeah, no. Well, the water's in the air. It's 85% humidity. Stephen Holder brought the Everglades with him. As I talked about, we're in Grand Park and/or Baton Rouge, depending on which way you want to look at it. But the Colts getting underway right now for practice. I'm in a confidence pool with 3 other buddies, right? And for those that don't know, a confidence pool is each week, if there's 17 games, the team that you're most confident is going to win, that's your 17-point game. Hey, I'm going to take the Packers and put 17 on that because they're playing, whatever. And then you go all the way down 17-1. And at the end of the early games, more often, I kid you not, this had to have happened last year like 6 different times, where I pull up my picks of the week and I look at my other 3 buddies and I go, man, I'm killing it. Like right now I'm on pace to go literally in the early games. There's 8 games, and I've picked 7 of the 8 correct, and I'm killing these guys. And that'll be at 3:45 in the afternoon, and then by 4 o'clock, 4 of the games have swung. It's like watching election results before the mail-ins come in, right?
The witching hour, man.
And he is in the last 2 minutes of games, the number of games that swing, it's incredible. With the team either making a terrible turnover or missing a golden opportunity or whatever it may be.
Busted coverage, yep. Yeah.
Busted coverage. And the way that those things can fluctuate, he was exactly correct when he said so many games come down to the last 2 minutes. Not just in a game, but in a half or in a quarter.
Yeah.
The last 2 minutes are so important. So I love the fact, and Shane Steichen, and I know that people could, they're not here so they couldn't see it, but when he was talking about the running the unscripted stuff at the end there, his energy level peaked up.
Yeah, for sure.
He himself was like, when he was describing that, he was, oh man, here's what you got to do. Like we're doing, and he's describing all of basically the organized hell breaking loose that takes place towards the end of a game. And I love that because I think that's the one thing that I don't know that you could ever properly and 100% prepare yourself for it in the NFL. But it beats the alternative, right, to just let's just go with it.
Well, and for somebody that has been described by many of his peers as one of the up-and-coming great offensive minds in the National Football League, naturally that type of high adrenaline, all-or-nothing mentality that goes through a 2-minute drill would be at the top of his list. Jake, the thing that just sitting here and, the quarterback room itself doing work directly across from us here at the northwest end of Grand Park, but so much of being great at the quarterback position often boils down to those 2-minute drills. You think about quarterbacks right now in the league where they get the ball and it's over. Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow. For this franchise, a pinnacle of it was Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck while he was here. And it's not fair to say this about Anthony Richardson yet because this is the de facto rookie campaign, but that's something you want to have restored in an offensive setting, is to know that it does not matter if you need a touchdown or a field goal. In this case, when 5 gets the football, it's game, set, match. It's done. You don't have to worry about miscommunication or errant passes or a bad read, because when that quarterback gets the football, they're going to go down and score. And I don't know where that is in the tenure of Anthony Richardson's pocketbook, but it was a staple of this franchise, and it's a staple for all of the great quarterbacks that have come and gone throughout time. So fitting that we just had the Hall of Fame enshrinement this past weekend, where you're able to go to Canton and see all these busts of legendary players. And with quarterbacks, that specific situational drill that then leads to that real-world experience of Week 5 in the regular season or a wild card game on the road, to know that you have that type of quarterback that could go and he gets the ball 2 minutes to go, it's game, set, match, is such a exhilarating feeling. That is one of the many pieces the Colts are trying to recapture with Anthony Richardson.
How many times over the course of an NFL week do you say to yourself when you're watching a game, and it could be, I just named 2 generic teams off the top of your head, the Minnesota Vikings and the San Francisco 49ers. How often do you see a team in a 20-16 game and somebody's got the ball on the 15-yard line and there's a minute 40 left? How often do you say to yourself, like, look, they should probably milk clock a little bit here because you don't want to score too early?
Yeah.
Because so many quarterbacks in the NFL now and so many offenses in the NFL now are just simply catered towards, like, let's go. Strap in and let's go in this last minute and a half, and we're just going for it, right? And there are more quarterbacks than one would imagine that can get that kind of thing done, If you are curious as to what's going on right now at Colts camp, I can explain it to you. The far north end of the practice field here at Grand Park is right now occupied by the quarterbacks of the Colts. That would obviously be Anthony Richardson, the leader of that group, and then as well Joe Flacco is there, and then you have an undrafted free agent out of Kansas, BYU. Sam Ehlinger's out there as well. But they were just throwing basically from the back of the end zone and throwing slant passes to receivers who then were going through a different padded contact drill, if you will. So they are just getting underway. They're just getting started here. And I've got to hand it to a lot of the people who are here and cover the practices in terms of day-to-day stuff, because when they're doing these kinds of drills, Shane Steichen would know, Reggie Wayne would know, but I think to the naked eye for so many of us, just in those little drills right there, it's really kind of difficult to tell, who's having a good day, who's having a bad day. What I liked about Shane Steichen is when I asked him also about leadership, and he really perked up at that point and could tell, when he was talking about, I thought E.J. Speed, it was a great answer when I said, what players exude a leadership that you don't necessarily see or that people would be surprised by. And he was just saying that it's all about approach. It's all about watching it. Like I was just watching Anthony Richardson. One play does not can't make, nor does it make a season. But, watching Richardson, and he's going through at the end of that drill, and he was high-fiving everybody. It's the little things, Jimmy.
He looks comfortable. He looks comfortable in this setting. And the question is, how quickly does that overall comfortability arrive for him over the course of the regular season? And I know that Shane Steichen jokingly told us he doesn't want to see as many of the valleys that perhaps I asked that question with. But all in all, for basically a de facto rookie campaign for him, the proper expectation for evaluating Anthony Richardson is there are going to be ups and downs over the course of this season. He needs to be allowed to make mistakes. He needs to be able to make the wrong read on 3rd and 4 or throw an errant pass that gets intercepted. Look, I would love for none of that to happen, for him to just be perfect and it be, 100% completion percentage and no turnovers and just perfect, but that's not possible. Even the very best quarterbacks in the league aren't throwing 100% completion percentage. It just doesn't happen. He needs to be able to make mistakes, grow and develop to the point that when we are talking in January and looking back at where we were at Grand Park in August, was there growth? Did you see steps forward for him? And look, you're right. One setting in camp does not an entire offseason make, but just watching the little things we can, body language, going through, he looks comfortable. And that's what you hope translates by the time you're into the start of the regular season.
He just, and again, this is a bit tiresome, I realize, but it was interesting watching the body language. Richardson just threw a pass that was low, and he was the first to realize it. As soon as he threw it, he turned around. He looked like me practicing golf and stared at the field for a minute, and you could tell he knew that was one that he wants back, right?
Yeah.
One that he wants back. We talked earlier, by the way, about the Olympics over the course of the weekend. Rajiv Ram, who won a silver medal in doubles, and I said, hey, let's see if we can get him on, right? He's the oldest tennis medalist in Olympic history.
The pride of Carmel.
The pride of Carmel. And he said, I'm already back in India, and I'm heading to Montreal today for my next tennis event. Going to try to get him on the show probably tomorrow.
Nice.
So tomorrow or
I tell you what,
maybe Wednesday.
The grind of the tennis schedule is unreal. Like, we get caught up in just the majors, but that's a full calendar of events in the same way all the other individual sports like PGA Tour golf are.
Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but if he's been in Paris for, a week and a half now?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So if he picked up on some French in Paris and then he tries to go immediately turn that over in Montreal, different French.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You go to Montreal.
Nuances or like straight up foundational differences?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm not bilingual unless we're talking about Swahili. But it is my understanding that if you were to talk to people in Canada, it's very similar to the Spanish that is spoken in Mexico or like Venezuela is different than the Spanish spoken in Madrid. So I think it's probably a lot like Indiana and Alabama. I mean, technically both English, but completely different, right?
Sure.
I mean, have you been to certain parts of Louisiana or Alabama and you're like, what? Say that again? What was that?
You need a dialect coach to figure it out, yeah?
Correct. So, but no, I think that it's similar, but it's not entirely the same language, and they will absolutely be the first to point that out to you. But that was a cool story yesterday, even though Rajiv Ram, I mean, that was an epic doubles final for the gold, and they narrowly missed it in tiebreaker fashion and getting a silver, but still very cool to be able to get a silver medal and then move along, now go to Montreal for the next round of the tennis tournament. The other big storylines, the United States absolutely controlling Puerto Rico, and Tyrese Halliburton did not score in that game. I believe he was the only on the roster to get on the floor and not score. I also got clarification. Jimmy, call me a moron. You will not be the first nor the last. Do you know the reason why Joel Embiid is booed so heavily at the Olympics?
Give it to me, Jake. Enlighten me.
I did not know this. So, Casey, did you know the reason Joel Embiid is so disliked at the Olympics? Every time he touches the ball, you know that, right? He's like booed unmercifully. People are probably yelling at their radio like, this guy's an idiot. He's got a radio show. How did he not know this?
I mean, outside of the whole controversy of why he's on Team USA, if it's different than that, then I.
Okay, what controversy are you speaking?
I can't remember. I've lost which team it is, but I can't remember if it was the French national team or what team it was. But there was a team that he was supposed to be a part of, and then he had a reclassification of citizenship, or maybe it was he had I can't remember the exact framework of it, but whatever it was, there was frustration from another country for him playing for Team USA.
That's correct. So he is a native of Cameroon.
That's what it is.
He grew up in Cameroon. Cameroon, of course, is, and I don't know the overall history of it, but Cameroon has obviously linked to France in terms of derivative, but he has French family or French descent of some sort. So he was initially offered. I don't know that he ever accepted, but he was offered, and it was expected and anticipated that he would be playing on the French national team. And he, since joining the NBA, has become a citizen of the United States. So he then elected to play for Team USA because that is his citizenship now, as opposed to the initial offering of the French national team. Needless to say, because they're playing in France, they took a little exception to that.
And
that's
the fact that adding Embiid to that team, I mean, look, I've said already during this Olympic run.
It's like giving me a bottle of cologne, right?
Sure, exactly. I've said during this Olympic run that I think Joel Embiid's minutes needs to be cut in certain circumstances. I think he's a liability at times for what Team USA is. That said, if you're looking at it from the French perspective, you're trying to dethrone Team USA. And if you add another NBA-level talent to that team that already features Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert, who's to say it doesn't even the odds a little bit? So I get the frustration. That said, it's gold sailing for Team USA basketball, it would appear.
I mean, they have absolutely, and again, I'm going to use a racing term, turned up the wick.
Yeah.
But they've hit the accelerator, right? Now, that's not to say – I think the thing that's interesting is some of the teams that I thought would be their more stout competition, they have really handled pretty easily, and some of them that I thought would be their biggest blowout have given them a little bit of a test. But most of that was in the pre-Paris games, right? Once they've gone there, it has, in fact, been – they basically have been able to move through. Now, is that going to stay the same? One would assume and hope. But
Brazil right tomorrow around 3:30.
Is Oscar Schmidt playing?
I don't.
Can we find out if Oscar Schmidt's playing?
I think he's out of eligibility.
Oscar Schmidt dropped 42 on Team USA in the '87 Pan Am Games, and then came back in '88 and was just absolutely a beast. The guy at that point was like 40 years old, and he was like JMV. Oscar Schmidt was like the Brazilian JMV in '87 and '88. Just stood on one spot, and they're like, just stand right here, and he just stood basically like Steve Kerr. And he was like 6'6", and he never missed.
I know you
didn't miss a shot.
I know you lived it, so it doesn't. Just for the younger audience, though, I can't remember the 30 for 30, but there is a documentary that covers Oscar Schmidt and that entire run to Pan Am glory. It's phenomenal.
Well, Oscar Schmidt is interesting because his athleticism was such that by the time he was on the map, he probably would not have been an immediate NBA type player.
Sure.
Once he introduced himself internationally, but that was before Jimmy. The international play was not necessarily what it is now. And by that I mean, it really was, and that's not to say the international players weren't getting their opportunity in the NBA. But Arvydas Sabonis, I had a conversation once with a basketball exec that was around back then that said Arvydas Sabonis in his prime might have been the greatest player of all time. But by the time he came to the Russian Federation would not release him from, and I can't remember what his actual, it might have been Lithuania, but whatever umbrella he was under would not release him to play in the United States. But his Arvydas Sabonis' passing ability alone and his touch and everything else was well ahead of his time. He was essentially Olajuwon, but even bigger and more dominant. But he couldn't play over here until he was essentially in the very twilight of his career, and still was really good with Portland. But Drazen Petrovic was the one that really kind of turned the tables a little bit. And when Drazen Petrovic came, the calling card for him was that he just had an unbelievable release, and he was a shooter that could shoot from anywhere. But it took him a while to get into the groove, and it wasn't until he was with the Nets that he really started going. And then, of course, he was tragically fatally injured in a car accident. But he really kind of opened the door. And Oscar Schmidt would have been kind of the bridge between those two,
sure.
And the point that he just probably was too old by the time that window had really opened up. But, yeah, he would absolutely have been. I remember when Tony Kukoc came to the Bulls, and everybody's like, talking about, and I'm like, look, Kukoc was an unbelievable player and probably the best international player in the world. But I'm like, what kind of a luxury is that? Of like, well, I'm just going to go and join the Bulls and Pippen and Jordan. And I mean, come on, right? Kukoc was a hell of a player. And that guy, his ability, I still, 3 times a year, I wake up in the middle of the night with a leg cramp. And then I suck a mustard packet and it goes away and I go back to sleep. Also, 3 times of the year, I wake up in the middle of the night because my team is up by 2 with 5 seconds to go, and Tony Kukoc has the ball in the corner. That guy killed the Pacers for so many games. I can't stand it. I still think about it. It drives me nuts. And probably a hell of a guy.
Where does that rank, would you say? Does it crack the top 5 of Jake Query things that invoke insomnia? Is Kukoc in that mark or no?
We're getting into a very
I know we are. That's why I don't want us to list all of them. But is it in the top 5? Would you say? Is Kukoc just hanging out with a scythe in his hand?
I mean, the Larry Johnson 4-point play is high on the list. There's a lot of neuroticism there that we haven't uncorked, right? I mean,
I can't start billing you by the hour, so don't know we can fully get into that today.
I'm sitting on a couch or on a chair and not laying on a couch. Let's put it that way. Jimmy's Plays of the Day brought to you by Greenfield Signs, by the way, coming up, and lighting coming up. About 20 minutes from now, we'll come back and recap for you what's taking place here at Colts camp, what took place over the weekend for the Colts, and what takes place over the course of this week when we return to Grand Park in Westfield. Query & Company 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. check here real quick. I got the little weather app. We all do.
Yep.
90 degrees currently. Now, are we going to guess the humidity percentage?
I'm going to say 64%.
64% humidity?
Yep.
Now, see, explain this to me. I don't understand. A couple things I don't understand here. The humidity is now 54%. It's dropped.
All right.
91, it says 90 degrees, feels like 91. If it feels like 91, it's 91, right? I've never understood that.
I haven't either.
It's 30 degrees out, but with the wind chill, it feels like negative 10. Then it's negative 10, right?
That's how I generally would have thought it.
Temperature, by and large, is a measurement to tell you the feel of the atmosphere, right?
Yep.
Why don't you call Brian Wilkes and ask him?
That's a great question, or a great point. We could call Brian Wilkes. Brian did point out to me when we had him on the other day when he was talking about the chance of 100% sunniness or whatever it was. Apparently,
did we get that, by the way?
Well, no. There was. He sent it to me at like 11:30. He sent me a thing. One cirrus cloud over Beech Grove, and so we dipped to 99%. The dream was gone.
Somebody called Chap. Bring him back over here. What happened?
What's that?
Call Chap. He's the mayor of Beech Grove.
We're not sure if it was actually a cloud or just actually a dust up from the two chicks fighting at the Walmart. But nonetheless, there was a cloud over Beech Grove, and it killed our 100%. You know what I mean? I mean, what are you going to do, right? But it is a little bit toasty. Over the weekend, the Colts saw Dwight Freeney putting on his yellow jacket. I did find it interesting in the weird way that my brain works, that the yellow coloring of his gold jacket was a different tone of gold than all of the shirts that the already enshrined players were wearing. Did you notice that?
I did not notice that. Do you think it's the freshness of the fabric?
The jacket may be a different material than the actual shirts. But they didn't match wits on the if you look at Freeney before he got once he got his jacket, Freeney's wearing the jacket, and then all of the others, Bill Polian, Peyton Manning, Edgerrin James, Marvin Harrison, and Tony Dungy in the photo, they're wearing golf shirts that are gold also. But it is a different shade of gold than the jacket. So I don't know if maybe they didn't match the two shades of gold or which it was. But those kinds of things, I'm not saying I'm OCD, but it drove me crazy. But nonetheless, Freeney getting in.
Do you think it's because so from one of these pictures, and it's just one that Peyton and Edgerrin and Polian and company, Dungy, everybody's there, Marvin, and then you have Jim Irsay front and center that I'm looking at right now. They're all wearing polos, and Dwight Freeney, is wearing the Hall of Fame jacket. So maybe the polos are the different color, perhaps? And they just don't have uniformity. But you would think an institution like Canton, Jake, would have that level of attention to detail, right?
Correct. That's what I'm saying. My
so
OCD
it's weird.
I don't know. I don't know if
maybe the jacket is so pristine that it has to be a different color.
It's entirely possible that there's lighting maybe, but it drove me crazy.
You think if you took the jacket to Lowe's and you're like, hey, I want to color match this, they'd be like, we can't. It's a big copyright issue. Like, we cannot match this.
Well, the other thing, too, is like the yellow jackets to me look a little too much like the 1970s ABC Wide World of Sport jacket.
I see that.
So like Jim McKay, Hall of Famer broadcaster, yes. Hall of Fame football player, maybe not so much. But it is always interesting when you see, and one of the things that happens every time that I watch the Hall of Fame ceremonies, and I don't mean this, I mean the Steve McMichael moment was, I really debated this in my mind. For Steve McMichael to be hospitalized, well, I mean, he's in obviously a hospice at home in a hospital bed, and he is in very bad shape. He is suffering from ALS and certainly appears to be in the very late stages of it. And they had the Bears players, his teammates, show up at his house to basically bring the induction to him. I will admit, and maybe this is inappropriate of me to say, there was part of me when I was watching it, because it was tough, that thought, man, should they be showing that on television? Now, hear me out before people jump on me here. Because he looked in grave condition, which he may be, I don't know, Steve McMichael. And then it dawned on me that I actually think it was appropriate that they showed it, because, number one, he deserves his moment and deserves to have the world see the joy from his teammates, his family, as much as any other player. And when you dream about your lifetime going into a Hall of Fame, you dream about the people showering the praise on you, and you deserve to have that displayed to the world as much as anybody else, regardless of your status and health. It was a very tough visual, and while I wondered whether or not they should have shown the tough visual, it then dawned on me that the answer is yes, not only for the reasons for which I just explained, but also because ALS is a horrific disease. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible, terrible illness. And, Lou Gehrig's disease, as it's known. But one of the things that makes it so incredibly cruel is that it essentially strips someone of their physical liberties, but while not deteriorating their mental capacities. So Steve McMichael was well aware of everything going on around him. Just because he couldn't respond to it doesn't mean that he wasn't aware, that he wasn't able to soak it in, that he wasn't able to feel that love. But I also think that it is important when we're talking about battles that we still don't have an answer for, and things which, for which we are still trying to raise money and research and funding and awareness, then there is an importance towards not hiding behind that. I go back to the famous scene in the movie Philadelphia with Denzel Washington when he's like, what are we talking about? We're talking about AIDS. All right, let's see it. Like, that's what we're talking about here. And I think sometimes it's important for people to see the truly terrible and cruel aspects of the enemy. And the enemy in that case is ALS, and the friend in that case is Steve McMichael. And he was as deserving not only of his moment as anybody, but also the efforts to fighting it, I think, were, in that case, illuminated and further championed by Steve McMichael.
It needs to be at the forefront, whether it's ALS, whether it's different battles with cancer. I lost my dad to Alzheimer's and dementia. And, if you keep things, and it takes courage and it takes strength for these families, Jake, but if you keep things behind closed doors, it gets easier for people to not fully understand it and think, oh, it's just another thing, no big deal. Why do we need to be spending all this money to fight for a cure for this? Well, once you see firsthand accounts and see stories of these battles, yes, it's tough. It takes a certain level of sacrifice to be put on display like that. But without those images, very powerful images of varying battles, especially with that disease, it can too easily get lost by the wayside or lost in the shuffle.
Listen, if you think that guy was a warrior, and I know that that's a term that people get offended by because they're true people that fight. But if you think that he was a tough soldier, again, same thing, I guess, a tough guy in football, and you thought that he was a fighter in football, and that's what got him into the Hall of Fame, then you see that and you realize that that's a true fight, right? And that's the human spirit right there was alive. And I went back and forth with it because just because something is tough to your eye doesn't mean that it shouldn't be absorbed like within the heart to witness it from the human spirit. And I thought that display was important in that. All right, Colts camp, again, continuing. Shane Steichen, Eddie will have the podcast up on the podcast center at 107.5 The Fan. But he joined us for, nearly, how long was that, Eddie? Nearly 20 minutes when Shane Steichen was on with us, right?
Yeah, it was 20 minutes, yeah.
So Shane Steichen, about 20 minutes, really good conversation. I thought pretty open, enthusiastic in some areas, energetic in talking about some areas, and then also very open about areas that he still feels are wide open for his football team and that are competitions that are still in play. So that will be up on the podcast center. Also, coming up just about, a couple of minutes from now, right on the other side, it is the always anticipated and almost 40% of the time accurate Jimmy's Plays of the Day. Brought to you by our good friends at Greenfield Signs and Lighting, which is based on the east side, but the
they're
family
100%
itself,
accurate over there, Jake.
They are 100% accurate. And listen, you are not always the most shining light when it comes to your picks, but theirs are always shining, and they are always there for you at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. So we will do that on the other side as we put a tie on it here from Colts camp at a very toasty, warm 90 degrees that feels like 91 at Grand Park in Westfield. It's Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Okay.
Grand Park in
It
Westfield.
was a timely promo, wasn't it?
Was indeed. The plays of the day brought to you, as always, by the fine folks over at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Sign is a professional, comprehensive sign company. 2 locations in central Indiana. They're family-owned and managed business. Been designing and creating effective and attractive signs for more than 4 generations. You only get one chance to make a first impression. Do it the right way. Do it with Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Today's plays of the day.
You know, people tell me all the time I'm both bright and effective.
I believe that. I'm sure every day. I think that comes your way. No doubt about that. A good mix of Olympic action as well as the MLB. There'll be some wake and cash type elements as well to our Olympic bets today, as there's scattered across here in the nitty-gritty of Olympic coverage. First, Jake, we go for Olympic surfing. We will take Gabriel Medina
This is a
of
sport?
Brazil. It is indeed a sport. In Tahiti is where these are taking place. We will take Gabriel Medina of Brazil to win the gold. That taking place at 4:30 today. The rest of these, both selections, are taking place tomorrow, either before the show starts or right when the show starts. We'll take the favorite from the United States, Samuel Watson, to win the gold in Olympic climbing. That in the men's division.
Okay.
Olympic speed climbing, I should say. He's at plus 125. That takes place at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Last one on the Olympic side, U.S. women on the soccer side are in the knockout rounds. They'll take on Germany. We will take Team USA to defeat Germany outright on the money line in regular time. In baseball today, give me the Boston Red Sox to win on the money line over the Kansas City Royals. We'll also take in the nightcap the Los Angeles Dodgers to win over the Philadelphia Phillies.
Streak-ins tonight for the White Sox.
It does. Think so? Calling your shot?
Calling the shot.
I respect it.
You know what? I take that back. 21. They'll go to 21, and then it's over.
Okay.
They got one loss left in them, and then it's over, and then the push begins.
Eddie, any baseball bets from you?
No, sir.
Alrighty, so no bets from Eddie. So those are your
I have
plays.
a bet I'd like to wager on this one.
Okay.
My bet for the Jimmy's Plays of the day is that your wife will actually have you on the couch when she finds out that you are now wagering on surfing and rock climbing.
It's possible. Thankfully, the couch is comfy, so hopefully it's a temporary stay.
Why the Brazilian in surfing?
Because I went and looked at a couple of smarter surfing analysts.
Did you Google Brazilian? Because I got news for you. That might have gotten a little bit hairy.
Well, I'm not on the work
Pardon the
computer,
pun.
so I suppose I would have been okay to begin with. But no, I just looked at whatever the equivalent of Golf Digest is, Jake, for surfing coverage, and looked at where they pegged the favorites to be. One of them was the Gabriel out of Brazil, so we went with him. Gabriel Medina to win gold. That taking place.
Surfing Digest has the odds on him?
Jake,
How much
cover
surfing
something.
do they do in Brazil? I realize that Brazil has a massive coastline. I mean, a huge coastline.
He's won 2 world championships.
But part of it's
and
on the equator,
finals.
and I don't know if you know this or not, but on the equator, no waves. Did you know that?
2 titles. I did not know that. 2 titles. I don't.
Made
Yeah,
that
I figured you
no
did.
idea if that's true or
2
not.
titles, 6 world championship
Now,
appearances.
the rock climber fellow, where's he from?
USA.
What part of USA? If he's from Kansas, that's the
Jake,
dumbest thing I've ever heard. What's he climbing
He's from
in
Colorado,
Kansas?
Jake. Is
Okay,
that where
well,
you
then
wanted
he's
to
got
be
a
from?
chance. Sure.
You say
If he's from-
Colorado?
if he's from North Dakota, then write him off. He has zero chance, right?
He's from Queens.
Now
he has a rock wall in his backyard.
I was going to say. Well, there was the one girl, Tori Allen, was that her name, from here in Indianapolis, that was like this unbelievable X Games rock climber? She was. Now, are these rock climbing walls in the Olympics, or are they taking them out to some cliff somewhere?
Jake, you're going too far behind the curtain.
Are they taking them to Ireland? They're like, here, just climb. The guy's going to win gold, or else he's going to get wet.
The proving ground is Everest, so you tell me. Okay.
Well,
Not everybody makes it back.
There are some that didn't medal, and now they simply are benchmarks. When you get to the guy that was from Kansas, then you know you've got still a little bit left to go to the summit, right?
Yes.
All right. So, Eddie, give us a lineup of what we have on tap for the big show tomorrow.
Tomorrow we'll have one of our favorite guests, Rowdy Gaines, will join us at 12:30. He will still be in Paris, I believe. He's soaking up some of the vacation time, I would assume. The swimming is completely done out there. And then Dustin DePirac will join us at 1 o'clock with Team USA playing at 3:30. And will probably be halftime in Team Canada's game with Andrew Nimhard. They're taking on France. And then at 2 o'clock, Stephen Holder will join us.
Is Trey Lyles still with the Canadian team? He's there too, right?
Yes.
I believe so.
From Tech High School?
Yep.
Okay. And we will obviously recap what may take place here in the next still 30 minutes left of this camp. It's been one that, at least from now and watching, and who am I to say because it is very warm outside, but it's been at this point a lot of walkthrough is the wrong word, but it's not been necessarily, they're not in full pads. So a lot of drills taking place. And then, as Shane Steichen talked about, the next 30 minutes or so is when they'll really start running those non-scripted plays and just simulate what happens in the final couple minutes of a game. So we will talk about that as well. Again, Eddie will have the Shane Steichen interview up on the podcast center. Thanks to the Colts for having us out, for Westfield and Grand Park for being hospitable and not stopping us when we were on our way in, especially Jimmy and I walking around aimlessly like we didn't know what was going on, and we managed to get our way. And the fine guys at the NFL Network for not getting mad at us for apparently interrupting their broadcast. Jack Johnston, the on-site engineer, great job. Also, Eddie Garrison back in studio. John is up next for The Ride with J&V, that is, of course, taking you until 6 o'clock. Is it the Ride or the Drive? The old one was the Drive.
The Ride
with
J&V,
right?
yeah.
I always get that
the
confused.
Ride.
Anyway, we'll be back with you at noon tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Query and Company.